This is the Clutch Picks Betting Podcast presented by ClutchPoints, powered by DraftKings. Like, follow, and subscribe, rate us, review us, all that other fun stuff. Podcast available on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. As mentioned, like, follow, and subscribe. You know, that's how you support the movement. That is the Clutch Picks Betting Podcast. My name is Sheldon Alexander, and I'm joined by Matt Russell, sports betting professional and creator of The Window. Available on Substack and wherever you get your podcasts. Mr. Matt Russell, it is Wednesday morning. We are heading into week 15. How are you doing, my friend?
Week 15, Shell. How did we get here? We're doing well. Still hanging in there. Man, it's crazy. I always forget in the NFL how quickly things turn from where we were through like 10 weeks with regards to some of these teams. And in the last like 2 or 3 weeks, we can just, right straight up just the Colts, right? Where it's, you just go like, they're paying 2 first-round picks for Sauce Gardner. They're like, we're making a run at it. It's like 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, they're like, we're out. Bill Rivers is involved. So I just look at it, and that's the macros or like
Grandpa
the
Simpson meme. Right? Like he walks in,
yeah,
takes his hat off, turns back around, and walks back out. Yeah.
It's crazy, man. And yeah, so much of this is just, just like completely turns. And that just tells you the importance of these games down the stretch, which, as we'll probably reference as we talk about this week's games, like so much of it comes down to like one play or this like outlier result or this sort of, the smallest things. And that's the thing with the NFL, man. We've talked about it all season long, right? With the idea of like our phrase has been buttoned up, and that's been sort of the common phrase, I think, in the lexicon. But like, man, all it takes is like 1 or 2 things to kind of fall apart, and then the whole thing comes crashing down. This is the Jenga season of all Jenga seasons, man. It's been wild.
Yeah, it's definitely been a wild season so far,
Mhm.
and the record indicates that. We'll get there in a sec. But for the people who are new to what we do here, I'm gonna foolishly try and give you a pick to each and every game on the NFL schedule. Matt comes in and he's talking market ratings, but he's talking information and education on where the line was, where it is, where it could be heading into kickoff. And then I try to come out on the other side with a much more informed pick. I play the role of the viewer. And sometimes Matt convinced me to change my pick, and other times I foolishly don't listen. But that's the joke. That's the bit. That's the show. Last week, a 5-9 record, bringing the season total to 102-4. Here we are. The goal, as mentioned, kids, is to try to win more than I lose. And again, 102-4. We're battling here. We're scrapping here. And what I'm trying to tell y'all is that I will finish the season strong.
Oh, it's like a Tim Tebow speech right now.
Yes. I saw Tim Tebow the other day. He was on the Flagrant Pod, and I was like, what did your agent get you into? Like, how did you end up on this podcast? What are you doing? Anyways, yeah, we're heading into week 15, as mentioned. And, just trying to keep the vibes rolling, trying to keep the vibes up. Last week was a very weird week in which a lot of games came down to one play or one flag, if we're talking about the Raiders and Broncos game, which was just a wild finish. And a reminder, kids, why you should be very careful with how much money you wager betting on sports.
Yeah, that's
just
fair.
A reminder. But anyways, Week 15, kids. Week 15 begins, as always, on Thursday Night Football with Falcons at the Bucs. Bucs laying 4.5 points at home. The Bucs lost to the Saints last week as Shuck balled out on their defense. Meanwhile, the Bucs had nothing on offense. Or not much on offense, I should say. Baker hasn't looked good in weeks. He has to be injured, right? He's been below 200 yards passing for the last 4 weeks. But the remedy might just be the Falcons, who really stink. Kirk Cousins needs Drake London. And even still, he might not be that good. So you look at this line and it says plus 4.5. And I'm on the Falcons at the plus 4.5. And the weird thing here, okay? I'm going to say this right off the top.
Okay.
I'm taking the points here. I'm starting taking the points here
Yeah.
can be easily convinced to switch to the Bucs. But really
Sure.
what this comes down to is the health status of the Bucs. I know there's talks that maybe
Yeah.
Mike Evans could be coming back. They could be getting some help coming back here. And if that's the case, more likely to be on the Bucs wagon here, because what I'm seeing from Kirk Cousins is not good. And the Falcons operation as a whole, as an institution, as a whole crew, it's not really a side I want to be on. So what say you, Mr. Matt Russell? Where are you leaning?
Well, and I think lean is really an appropriate way to sort of say this, right? Because you mentioned the injury issues, and that to me is the big sort of deal here. You mentioned Drake London. I assume you're saying like Kirk Cousins isn't any good because we know that Drake London is bleeping awesome.
Correct.
And so he is critical because if you just look at the prop market for this game with regards to like receiving yards for the Falcons and like what your options are if you even want to just bet on the characters that are involved for Atlanta.
Okay.
And it's like Kyle Pitts. And like if you've been following Kyle Pitt's career in any way, shape, or form, fantasy football, betting related or otherwise, you're going, oh, okay, fine. And then it's like, Darnell Mooney, and there's, any number of Sills. I believe it's the fourth. And so you're just like, what's happening with this roster? And so yeah, if they got Drake London back, that would be a really big deal. But for Tampa Bay, right, the possibility and the murmurs were going into last week. Mike Evans back at practice, Jalen McMillan back at practice, and then they come into the game and they actually don't have either of those guys against the Saints. And then they also don't have Tristan Wirfs against the Saints. And we know how important Tristan Wirfs is. So those three guys would be considerably helpful, particularly your starting left tackle against the Falcons. And, we know that Baker Mayfield's injured. That's not even sort of a question mark, right? Like we've seen it against the Rams. And then obviously when the lead up to, what was it, the Cardinals game where we might have had a Teddy Bridgewater start, which would have been just absolutely nightmare fuel for everybody involved. And so, the way I look at this game, I go, well, the Buccaneers rating has taken an absolute hit as people have finally realized that they are like 1-4 in their last 5 games, and they're now tied with the Carolina Panthers for the division. And you and I have talked about having the Carolina Panthers and a little futures market action from before the season, going like maybe the Panthers are actually not terrible this year, and in a division that not terrible often wins, maybe 6-1 odds makes a little sense. Well, here we are through 13 weeks. 2 teams, 7-6. Looks like it makes a lot of sense. So I would love to tell you like the Buccaneers are like definitely going to go down here, and like it's going to help the Panthers' futures here a little bit, especially since they're playing the Saints. But the market is supposed to dictate the bet, not the teams, right? We start with the market and then we look at the teams. And this number, think about it this way. Shall remember 3 weeks ago? The first Kirk Cousins game in his, after Penix was knocked out for the season. You remember, right? They went to New Orleans.
Correct.
New Orleans was a 2-point favorite in that game, suggesting at that time that Atlanta and New Orleans were about the same. Now, you can look at the final score and be like, no, Falcons won that game. They are not the same, blah, blah, blah. Or you can look at the box score. You can watch that game pretty intently and go, honestly, the Saints really just blew that game because they couldn't do anything correctly in the red zone. They got in the red zone. They got to the goal line a bunch of different times, and they couldn't do anything. Fast forward to last week, and they are 8.5-point underdogs against Tampa Bay. We were on the Saints in that game. At least I was. We were on that on the money line in that game because we're like, this line is too high. Well, fast forward 4 days, and now all of a sudden the Bucs are only 4.5 against a team that was just considered the equals to the Saints. And again, you can be like, well, that was 2 or 3 weeks ago. Still, it's just 2 games. Right. Yeah. Meanwhile, the Falcons have just lost 2 games. One of those was at the Jets, and the other one was a pretty decisive second half blowout. Yeah. So what are we supposed to like about the Falcons any more than, the Saints necessarily? So, I just look at this game and I go, man, this is kind of a really short number here for the home team on a short week. We can start doing, we can start singing the song about backs against the wall with Baker Mayfield. And like, they really need to win this game because listen, they got a couple more games left with the Panthers. And fundamentally, I think the division comes down to if either of those teams can win both of those games. But right now the Buccaneers have the tiebreaker, but if they lose this game, that goes away. And so this game is mission critical. So do I think Wirfs is going to kind of play through whatever is bothering him? I do. Do I think we're going to see Mike Evans in this game? I do. And I think if we see Jalen McMillan, now we got a full-scale fleet of wide receivers for Baker Mayfield and a really good check down option with regards to Bucky Irving. Now, the run game hasn't been great since Bucky's come back. It's been 3.6 yards per carry for Bucky in this case. But I still have faith that that guy can, obviously make big plays either through the air or on the ground. And he's had a touchdown in each of the 2 games. So, if we can finally get, it's hard to say full health because nobody's at full health, and certainly Baker Mayfield isn't.
Yeah.
But if we can get this team, everybody on the field for this team, then that's going to be a considerable difference, especially if Drake London is not back for Atlanta. And so again, just from, we hesitate often to sort of say the value is on the favorite, but I've just watched the Buccaneers market rating crater to the point where they are considered a below average team. And maybe that's the case, but what are the Falcons, right? Because the Falcons they haven't been kind of knocked out. There was a point, again, when we're talking about that Saints game, thinking of them as sort of equals to the Saints. It's not because the Saints got some sort of massive upgrade to become equals to the Falcons. It's because the Falcons got a downgrade. And so they win that game because, Kirk Cousins connects with Mooney on one long pass. And obviously, as I mentioned, the red zone fiasco for the Saints. And now all of a sudden, the Falcons are just kind of like back to being certainly not an average team, not even really a below average team, but like, I don't think the Falcons are as good as the Panthers. I don't think the Falcons are as good as the Dolphins. That's the teams that they're rated next to right now. So again, because this game is like a total mess with everything, all things moving, you have to also throw in the fact that Kirk Cousins had his 2 best games last year against the Bucs. And go like, oh, come on, because in theory we're supposed to trust Todd Bowles and look the Bucs defense, whatever. The defense has been bad. The defense has been just as bad as the offense has been. It's how you lose as many games as the Buccaneers have, really. 2-5, where there's a win against the Saints that was unimpressive. And then the win, 3-point win against the Cardinals, who are spending all of the rest of their time getting blown out. So, fundamentally, I think these are kind of 2 bad teams up until this point. But at least there's sort of hope for the Buccaneers, and they have Baker Mayfield while the Falcons have Kirk Cousins. You could even do the Kirk Cousins in primetime thing if you wanted to. But, again, so like it's a bit of a kind of a blind faith that the Buccaneers are going to kind of play maybe not the best game of their season, but at least to their average that we thought they were capable of throughout the start of the season. And that's of an above average team. And if even sort of a slightly above average team shows up on Thursday night for the Bucs, then they should be able to take care of the Falcons, because the Falcons are a bad football team, especially without Drake London. So obviously a bunch of moving pieces here, but my lean for sure is definitely on the Buccaneers. Going to go out there shopping for a -4 because I think that might come in handy here if this turns into that back and forth type of a deal where, maybe you need -4 as a backup plan here for a push. But I'd like to think, man, that Kirk Cousins can't have a 3rd straight awesome game against Todd Bowles and his defense just on sort of game planning. Because, man, he had like 8 touchdowns to no interceptions or something like that last year against this Bucs team. Yeah, that was last year. This is this year. I hope. I can't imagine a 3rd straight amazing game for Kirk Cousins, but you never know.
Yeah, the Bucs had Tyler Shuck looking like Mike Vick on a couple plays there last week, but I don't think Kirk Cousins has that in his bag, and so that's why you hear the gong, and the pick has been changed to the Bucs -4.5. Again, I'll give you the lean. I'll be honest when I'm like, I'm shaky on this one.
And why wouldn't you be? Why wouldn't you be, man? This is such a shaky game. This could go any number of ways, frankly.
Well, from a shaky game to a big boy game, we moved to Sunday's action. We got the Bills as 1.5 favorites in New England taking on the Patriots. Pat's coming off a bye, which to me, I'm always going to say is key right off the bat. The Bills off a comeback win versus the Bengals, and a great play by Bedford. That play by Bedford, I don't think is getting enough love for just as insane of a play as it was to not only catch that, but then take a house and kind of flip the whole game. That on top of Josh Allen going Josh Allen and doing the things that he does to put the team on his back. The Pats. Here's where I'm at with the Pats. And I love the fact coming off a bye, all the talk about Vrabel on a bye, all that fun stuff. But the Pats are at home. You also add in the fact that they've already beaten the Buffalo Bills this season. On the road. I'm on Vrabel and company here because this is a straight just win, baby, win. Let's go. We're at home. We're coming off the bye. We already beat these chumps. Let's go.
We already beat these chumps. I mean, as long as Josh Allen is on the roster, I don't, and listen, I've had negative things to say about the Buffalo Bills at large,
yes,
right?
correct.
And you know that. I think everybody knows that. And listen, I've said this before, right? Like to me, it's everybody but Josh Allen. Like Josh Allen, I mean, and that's sort of obviously not factoring in James Cook, who's outstanding, and so on and so forth. I just at this point in the season, I especially, sometimes it matters on like how many points you're giving. Like if you're laying 6 against Joe Burrow, like no, I don't want to be laying 6 against Joe Burrow. That's a Joe Burrow thing. That's not a Josh Allen thing. And I say that after those 2 interceptions, particularly the one that you're referencing, right? Where you just kind of go like, because it's Joe Burrow, we give him a pass. If it were any other quarterback, probably we'd be like, dude, what are you doing? It's like, I mean, Joe Burrow's doing literally everything else, including then, circling back for a backdoor type cover after, things got super weird in that game. But fundamentally, right, if the question is, can you win this game? I just want to go with Josh Allen. I just want to go with Josh. I think Josh Allen's the MVP of the NFL. I don't think that's rocket science. He literally won it last year. Matthew Stafford's going to put up a bunch of numbers. That story has obviously, been the thing for the first 13 weeks, 14 weeks of the season. But if we're actually watching football, and again, I know that's not really what people do, red zone era, right? Where it's like, just show me the highlights, show me the stats, my fantasy football team. Not that Josh Allen isn't winning games for people in their fantasy football league, but like, just watch the games, man. Like Josh Allen's unbelievable. He is unbleeping believable. And so, you mentioned that, the game obviously earlier in the season, and that was a wacky Sunday night game. Teams are turning the ball over left, right, and center. Like it was this very sort of strange thing here. For me, that's reason to like the Bills even more in a game, in a rematch of a game that was largely sort of evenly played, except for the Bills had 3 turnovers in that game, right? 2 fumbles lost along with an Allen interception. I like the Bills defense is getting a little bit better. There's been some, obviously they've played indoors against the Texans. They've played in the snow against the Bengals. The run defense is starting to, I don't know if they're making some changes there or what. I think maybe one of the better things that's happened to them is, some of the injuries that they've had to guys who sort of just kind of like, they were starters because they were starters last year. And maybe they were part of the reason why, the Bengals have, or the Bills defense has had its struggles. I look, you mentioned obviously the bye week. That's, I think, getting factored into the rating here because the Patriots rating has ticked up. And part of that is because they won and covered against the Giants in the last game that they played. Listen, if the Patriots get a 95-yard punt return touchdown, if they get a kicker stubbing his toe into the ground because he panics because the hold wasn't perfect, and if they get a fumble on a kickoff return, then yeah, the Patriots are probably going to win this game. They're probably going to win, and they're probably going to cover a lot of games in that situation. A lot of football teams will. I certainly wouldn't bet on that being the circumstance that happens in this game. And fundamentally, this is a Josh Allen MVP push, we're not done yet here from an AFC East perspective. And listen, I don't think the Bills care about going on the road to Foxborough in this game any more than honestly if they went on the road anywhere else, because Foxborough is not that much different than Buffalo from like a weather perspective, so you're not getting that like drastic element to it. I'm ready for this game, and this is the deal where the Bills right now, even though they're not slated for a home game in the playoffs, are right now the favorite in the AFC because of Josh Allen. And again, we rarely bet on just sort of the greatness of one player to kind of supersede everything going forward, but like that's where I'm at with Josh Allen right now. Like that. He's unreal. And so, yeah, like Drake May might do some stuff and like they might be able to run the football better than they have all season. It's been 1 week since Will Campbell went out, left tackle of the Patriots. I thought we'd get a little bit more of some pressure from the Giants. They got Abdul Carter sitting on the sideline, didn't have, I believe it was Kayvon Thibodeau in that game. We've talked about it, right? Like the Bills are built to stop the Chiefs. Ironically, they may not have to this season, but they're built in theory to play against the pass, right? It's why really they're so bad against the run against some of the bigger teams. Well, the Patriots aren't defined as one of those sort of bigger run first type of teams. And so, by the way, the Patriots, we can do the whole thing in the spirit of college football being sort of chaos in the last week or two. We can do the thing where we reference the Patriots' schedule up until this point, right?
Mhm.
Like these two games this week and then the Ravens next week, which, by the way, might turn into a game that's not all that difficult relative to where we thought the Ravens were going to be. But like, this is the one. This is the game that if the Patriots are a Super Bowl contender, they win this game. I'm not necessarily sold on the Patriots being that Super Bowl contender this year, and therefore I have to put my money where my mouth is, and I'm going to be on the Bills here. Essentially at Pick'em on the money line to win this game, tighten the division up. Again, after that, who knows, right? Like the Patriots' schedule being what it is the thing that might override this whole deal and give them the division. But when it comes to, hey, the Bills are going to need to go on the road then for the playoffs, and they're going to have to probably go to Foxborough at some point. And I think this is the message that's going to be sent from Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills that they still are the best team in the AFC East, even though, as we've mentioned, they got a handful of flaws on that team.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I'm just excited to watch this game, and it's such a close line. Obviously, it's basically a pick'em game, so it's a toss up on either side. You almost had me here switching to the Bills, but I'm riding with Vrabel. I'm riding with Vrabel right now, coming off the bye. I'm not gonna lie to you. That's what's going on with me right there in that one. But we go on to another pretty big game, despite the fact that both these teams will be struggling to make the playoffs here. But we got the Ravens as 2.5-point favorites in Cincinnati to take on the Bengals. Bengals, as just mentioned, blew the game in the snow against Buffalo last week. Burrow looked really, really good, and then, made a couple plays that didn't really go so well for him. But the offense looked good for the most part. Having everyone back, you're seeing T. Higgins ball out. We're obviously familiar with Jamar Chase as well. But on the Ravens side of things, I don't even know where to start with the Ravens. Yeah. You let Aaron Rodgers ball out on you. Dude, you let Aaron Rodgers was throwing deep balls, things that Aaron Rodgers doesn't do. You let Aaron Rodgers scramble for a touchdown on you, things that Aaron Rodgers doesn't do. And it's just like, what is going on with Lamar? We talked about Baker being injured. Is something up with Lamar that we still don't really know what the case is? Bottom line here, this comes down to, I believe in the Bengals offense. The Ravens offense, I don't know if they could put up the points. If I'm getting points with the Bengals here, I'm going to take those points with the Bengals at +2.5.
That's right. I mean, fundamentally, right, we haven't actually seen the Ravens line, their market rating shift in a way that's going to change this line. Mm-hmm. Because this was, I think we talked about it last week. We're like, it's like the look ahead line for this is like 3 or 2.5 or whatever. And we're like, we can get Cincinnati right now as a home underdog in this rematch, where as much as we can point out the things that went wrong for the Ravens in that previous game against the Bengals, it's not like it got buttoned up and changed last week against the Steelers. And by the way, like, I don't know that the Bengals and Joe Burrow was in like full, mid-season form in that, particularly in the first half against the Ravens. And, you referenced the Rodgers going deep, and I have to sort of mention it because we had under long pass completion for Rodgers. And on the first play of the game, he goes deep, and like Romo and Nance are literally like yelling. It's if they read the article where they're like they're literally yelling like, they haven't had one of these in a month. They went through November without a long pass completion. I was like, Tony, did you bet the under 2? Like, are you a window pane? Because it was the same thing, so you just sort of have to laugh in that circumstance. But so, we're going to sort of laugh through the tears a little bit in that one. But like, you don't think that Jamar Chase, and hopefully T. Higgins is healthy, and he's been sort of back and forth with regards to like, does he have a concussion? Does he not? He certainly didn't play like he had a concussion last week. With the catches that guy was making, was unreal. Mm-hmm. And so, hopefully out of the snow. I don't, necessarily know what the forecast is for Cincinnati this weekend, but like, they're going to be able to throw on the Ravens. The Ravens' communication breakdown, like, speaking of plays in that game and long pass completions, Jalen Warren, caught a quote unquote 40-yard, touchdown pass on a play where Pat Fryermuth is running down the field, like stomping his feet because he's so open and he's so mad that Rodgers doesn't throw it to him. Only he can only be mad for about a half second before he realizes that Warren's got the ball and he too is wide open running through. And so it's like if you're leaving an entire half of the field open from time to time, like that is like it doesn't matter what players you have. You can sing a song and tell me all about the players they have on the team. But one, if you can't stop go balls going over your shoulder, and two, you're just not covering multiple guys on a play-to-play basis, like that's not something like I guess it could be corrected, but like we're talking about week 14 and week 15 here. Like that's going to get corrected all of a sudden. So, and then you talk about the offense, right? And like, again, you sort of reference the idea of like maybe there's like we know there's an injury to Lamar. It's like the whole season's been built.
Listen, I'm going CP3 to Blake here, okay? I'm going CP3 to Blake.
Yeah, I'm like Shell, like we know it's like there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. There's an injury here. Meanwhile, you watch Derrick Henry, and again, unless he's already through the line of scrimmage, like it ain't really working for Derrick Henry, right? Like he goes down for a guy that big so easily with just kind of arm tackles at the line of scrimmage, who then on the occasion when he gets out and loose, he's then running very fast and stiff arming guys left and right. But you're just watching this offense going, there isn't really anything to this. And so, yeah, like I think the Ravens are wildly overrated. And I think that the Bengals don't get credit for how well they played in that game right up until the point where, again, it's a sort of a run pass option thing. And Burrow sees the blitz coming. Like it's not like it surprised him, and he's like, "All right, let's not run the ball here. Let's throw it to my wide open, generational receiver." Because I believe it was Chase who was the target. And it's snowy, it's cold, and the ball just doesn't necessarily go as far. It's also one thing that I haven't sort of mentioned publicly on my show or anything like that. Quarterbacks really, like professional quarterbacks, really suck at like lofting the ball in these sort of short screen pass type scenarios. Like, and I mean, maybe like defenses are getting better at blocking these plays.
Yeah.
I think of like the Mariota one in the overtime against Denver, right? On the 2-point. And it's just like throw the ball higher. And like none of these guys are able to throw the ball sort of higher to get it past these first levels of these defenders. It's like this one sort of kryptonite thing for all of these really good quarterbacks. So, again, that one fluky play could have easily been just a knockdown, incomplete pass on first down. Wouldn't have been a big deal, right? Or even maybe if Burrow is able to tackle Benford, maybe it isn't end up being a big deal. It was just this play that was so high leverage to that game. The point of that is like it's this one kind of fluky play that to me hasn't or has kept the Bengals rating down under a below average team. But the two games that we've seen play from Joe Burrow, whether it's the 60, full 60 minutes against the Ravens, or if you tuned in with 5 minutes to go against the Bills, you're looking at the Bengals and going, this is a better than a below average team. This is an above average team. So like I look at this and I go like, why aren't the Bengals at the least a pick 'em in this game, if not potentially a favorite? And so, maybe I'm missing something, and maybe after, weeks and weeks and weeks of waiting for the Ravens to be sort of good, maybe that finally happens. But the reality is, or at least my sort of speculation is that Lamar Jackson injury essentially just delayed us realizing that the Ravens aren't any good.
Mm-hmm.
Because like we were kind of thinking that
the signs were there.
Week 2 and week 3 going like, how's this team like? It's like, well, the schedule's tough and they play these good teams, and then of course they like go to Kansas City. And it's like, oh man, these are the tough teams that have to play. The Lions, of course, beat them on Monday night, and then of course he gets injured, and we just go, well, here comes Lamar. Like they're gonna win out. They're gonna win this division easily, and like yada yada yada. And it's like, yeah, or maybe they just weren't any good in the first place.
Yeah.
And so when he goes out, it sort of is a smokescreen. And I think that's kind of where we're at right now. So I think, it's kind of a bit of a wrong team favored situation, because I can make the case that the Bengals with Joe Burrow, whether it was before the season when they were expected to win 9.5 games from a win total perspective, like they're a better than average team here. So I'm not even positive that the Ravens are at this point. So yeah, man, give me the Bengals at home.
Yeah, right here with you with the Bengals. And I just think the whole like lore of the Ravens, to me, last week's a game where they button it up, and it's like, okay, we're here, it's go time, let's go,
Yeah.
whatever. And to have that performance, it's just like, oof, yeah, eye-opening to say the least. Speaking of eye-openingly bad performances, tongue twister there, the Chiefs definitely coming off one of those games. And now they move on to their week 15 matchup where they are 4.5-point home favorites to the Chargers. I'm on the Chargers here plus the 4.5. I'll start there and say that's where my lean is. The Chiefs just continue to lose the close games that they won last year. Their O-line was banged up, which, you know, when you're talking about betting these games, sometimes one of the things we talk about in terms of where the line is and where it's going and all that fun stuff to pay attention to is the late, you know, obviously we record this on Wednesday. That game is Sunday night. There's a lot of late news about their O-line being banged up. That's obviously a massive, massive deal to have Patrick Mahomes running for his life in that game, right? Sure. So you look at that game, O-line banged up, Kelsey dropping passes, Rashee Rice. So I'm going off a little bit of a tangent here. So
do
it for
it.
a sec, but Rashee Rice, the Raptors played on Sunday. So I was like working, not locked into football, jump back in on football midway through the fourth quarter there. And late in that game, Rice is dropping passes. And I'm like, yo, what the hell? Rice never drops these passes. Later on that night, I'm like, wait, let me catch what happened like earlier on in this game. And I see him get blown up. And I was like, oh, okay, that might affect me going over the middle a little later on in the game. Like I would blame my guy. You know, I get it. It's the NFL. And obviously he should catch those passes. I get it.
Yeah.
But when I saw that hit, I said, oh, okay, that might give me a little, you know, a little bit of pause there going over the middle late in that game. I say all that to say the Chiefs are in tough right now. And, you know, Kelsey is washed. We've been talking about that for years. Their offense just isn't it.
Yeah.
Right? Their offense just isn't it. That fourth down play, going for it on the 30. I know we can debate that back and forth. I think the call
I don't even know if we can.
Well, listen.
I think you're expecting me.
But
I think you're expecting me to be like, no, analytically, like it's the correct move or whatever, because a lot of the times, like I'm pro keeping the ball. But I think, you know, I'm also pro like knowing the game that you're in.
Exactly.
And that's a 10-10 game that you just like basically had 5 straight 3-and-outs in the Texans. It's insane to go for it.
And you're giving them the field position they weren't able to get on their own.
But
to me, what I was going to say is it wreaked desperation. Right? Yes. Like it wreaked a bit of panic, and that's not something we've seen from Andy Reid and Mahomes, or when we have seen that, we know they're in trouble. And they're in trouble. This game, 4.5 points is just too much for me to lay with them at home. I know I rambled for a bit there, but
no,
it just basically comes down to that. 4.5 is just too many points here for me to lay with the Chiefs at home against a lot of teams, much less a Chargers team that I just think is pretty good. You know, pretty decent. They can put points on the board.
Yeah, and listen, I hate this. I hate the Chiefs. I hate this game. I hate everything that's sort of happened here with regards to last week. I'm so glad that you mentioned that Rashee Rice thing. I hadn't thought about that because you get sort of caught up in the idea of, like, for me, you know, I'm always trying to figure out, like, all right, who's good? Yeah. And like, I know Patrick Mahomes is good. Yeah. And I know that everybody around Patrick Mahomes is going to be elevated. You know, let's put it this way, right? If Travis Kelsey has whatever stats that he's got this year, and 600, 700 receiving yards, 500, whatever it is, bunch of touchdowns, etc., right? Like, would he have that on any other team? Right? We've talked about how, like, he gets schemed up for these, like, 30-yard gains because nobody's anywhere near him, and he can catch the ball, and he can just kind of, like, run it down the field, and it's, like, a reasonable facsimile of Travis Kelsey in the past. But, like, how many other teams would Travis Kelsey have that production on, right? And so Rashee Rice, who's in the prime of his career, it's the same kind of deal. How many, like, would he be the quote unquote number one guy, a guy that you start every week in fantasy if he was on, like, I don't know, the Washington Commanders, right? Yeah. Like, is he a better receiver than Terry McLaurin? I don't think so. Imagine that trade, right? Yeah. Like Terry McLaurin in the Chiefs offense would be unreal. And so we kind of just assume, oh, not number one receiver on the Chiefs, he has to be a good, really good, great football player, or he's just in a really great spot right? Where most of the time the ball is put right in the place where it's supposed to be. So I'm going to backtrack a little bit on kind of being negative about Rashee Rice, because you're right. He might have had concussion-like symptoms, or just been like, yeah, I don't really feel like getting a hit like that again. So that's, again, it's an incredibly, I think, salient point. The reason that this game bothers me, this market bothers me, is that, like, couple of things. Number one, last week on a Wednesday, it was Chiefs -3. Right.
Yeah.
And we're like, fundamentally, I'm like, I think there's value on the Chiefs. I think the line should be over a field goal. I think there's, an overrating happening with the Texans. I think maybe there's a tiny underrating of the Chiefs because them losing the week before against the Cowboys, so on and so forth. And so then when you get to Sunday, before that game starts, about an hour before that game starts, and you go, let's take a look at the old market here, see if there's anything that we kind of need to do. And you see that the Chiefs are up to -5 against the Texans. So you were talking about the news being negative for the Chiefs, about the offensive line and all these guys being injured. And meanwhile, I'm watching this line up to 5 at some places, and I'm like, as you like say, the math ain't math in here, man. Like, it should be going the other direction. And so I'm just sitting there going, like, can I go back in time and, like, if, again, we talked about this, fair amount, right? If I had known it was going to be Chiefs -5, I'd have been on Houston, especially knowing all of those injuries. It's a super easy handicap. You go, like, it's +5 for the team that, defensively is going to be able to take advantage of the offensive line, so on and so forth. Like, it's a 2-sentence handicap. Yeah. Instead, I'm still right about there being value at -3 because the market corrects itself and goes to 4.5 and 5. So I'm not wrong about that. Yeah. And then, by the way, we watch the game and we go, if a couple of guys, and this goes back to Noah Gray twice during the game on really easy throwing catches, it's the Rashee Rice on 2 4th downs, and of course it's Travis Kelce later in the game, and you just go, if any of those get caught, and Andy Reid just keeps kicking the ball. And by the way, CJ Stroud somehow holding onto the ball while he's getting drilled on some of these 3 and outs. Like, there was one, it was inside like the 10-yard line where I'm like, oh, that has to be a fumble. And it's like, no, he just held on to it. And listen, Stroud made a couple of good plays, but like the best thing he did was hang on to the ball on that sack. And it's just like, man, if you just keep punting it to them, like, I think you're going to get an interception or a fumble here, like something along those lines. Like, just don't screw it up. Which, of course, brings us to the Chargers, who, if Jalen Hurts just doesn't keep screwing up,
over and over
and over, right? Because the handicap for that game is, and I literally wrote it for Yahoo, Saquon Barkley is going to have his best game of the season, or should have his best game of the season, because the run should be available for the Eagles, and there should be something that even he could possibly pop for a touchdown. Well, correct. 130 yards later and a 50-yard touchdown later, we're correct about that. And by the way, like, as much as the Chargers offensive line can survive against, say, like the Raiders, even without Jalen Carter against the Eagles defensive line, it's going to be problematic, especially for a guy with a broken left hand. Well, Justin Herbert gets sacked 7 times. He completes 11 passes the entire game, right?
It's a tough
the handicap is correct, except Jalen Hurts swoops in and is like, you get an interception and you get an interception? Oh, you fumbled it? I will recover that fumble, but I'll fumble it right back to you. And it's just like, what is this clown doing out there, right? And like, why are they passing on 2nd and goal from the 1.5 yard line? Like, the whole operation is just completely moronic. But they would have survived all of that. And again, you'd think we're talking about the Eagles handicap for this game, but I think that's a whole other story. But they would have survived all of that if they had scored a touchdown in overtime. But then Hurts has to come in and throw like one more interception to just jam everybody on a ridiculous stare down of a receiver on a ridiculous play. By the way, another run pass option situation where it's like, we're going to opt for passing. And it's like, when you're running the ball as well as you have when you have Saquon Barkley, the whole thing is insane. And so the point is like, what is this number? If the Chiefs catch a pass or two, or they don't go for it on 4th and 1, and they just like do the thing the Chiefs do and they win 13-10, which is what looked like was going to happen. Like, the betting market had the Chiefs considerable favorites at 4th and 1 in that game when it was 10-10. So what happens if they actually catch a few passes? What happens if Jalen Hurts, who, by the way, had only thrown one interception up until that point, right? So if the handicap was all those two positive things for the Eagles, and then I just say, like, oh, but Jalen Hurts is going to throw 4 interceptions and fumble, you'd be like, well, where are you getting that information from? Like, what would ever make you think Jalen Hurts is going to throw 4 interceptions? And I wouldn't have any answer for you because it's just completely out of character. And so the point is like, you're not going to say that the Chiefs dropping those passes are necessarily out of character, because that's the thing that has been sort of bothersome to them and to Patrick Mahomes over the last few years, not even just this season. But you've got these two sort of things that, like, yeah, man, the Eagles could have won that game by 10, 14 points when you start looking at everything that went into that. And if that's the case, how do we feel about the Chargers on the road? And if the Chiefs win that game, how do we feel about the Chiefs? And so I don't know that the line would have been particularly higher, right? Because the look ahead line for this was 4.5. So the thing that concerns me is that there isn't this obvious thing where it's like, well, it'd be -6, so we need to take the Chiefs. It's more just that, like, the betting market, odds makers, bettors looked at those two results, looked at those two games, and just kind of like crossed their arms and are just sitting there going, nope, it's 4.5.
Yeah.
And I'm with you fundamentally, where I look at it and go, like, you're going to give me 4.5 with, I don't want to say any team, against Kansas City now, but it's this very inviting thing where, like, we've had this line basically like 3 times in a row, whether it was Colts, whether it was Cowboys, whether it was the Texans, right? It's been right around 3.5, kind of toggling back and forth, and they lose 2 of those 3 games and could have lost the third, and yet the number's 4.5. And so you just go, like, yeah, like, it's so stubborn to keep just saying, like, the Chiefs should be rated the way that they're rated. But it's not like you're talking to, like, some guy at the bar or like a Chiefs fan or whatever. You're talking about the betting market at large, one that didn't seem to care that the offensive line was so banged up and sent the Chiefs from -3 to -5 before that game last week, and then was almost right about that. Because, by the way, like, part of our handicap at -3 and going, like, while we're not just recognizing value, we're going to take the value, was going, like, well, the Chiefs work around offensive line issues all the time.
Yeah.
And they did, right? Like, Patrick Mahomes wasn't getting sacked, like, on repeat. CJ Stroud was the one who was getting pressured more than Mahomes was. And so they did all the things that they were supposed to do right up until the point where everybody dropped the friggin' ball. And so you just go, like, does that mean they're going to drop the ball this week? Like, no, not necessarily. Of course, we'll watch the game, then they'll drop a bunch of balls. We'll be like, yeah, of course they do. They do this all the time. That's what's infuriating about, listen, football handicapping at large, right? But also looking at this line and just going, like, shouldn't this be 3? And then going, like, yeah, I think so. But, like, also, again, we're still waiting on this, like, good performance from the Chiefs. And, like, are they going to be able to run the ball against the Chargers? Probably, right? It's not going to be as explosive as Saquon Barkley. But if that turns, more second downs into 2nd and 5s versus, like, 2nd and 9s and 2nd and 10s, the way that the Chiefs kind of had against the Texans, because the Texans' run defense is good and the Chargers' run defense is bad, then all of a sudden things open up a little bit more for the offense and Patrick Mahomes, right? And of course, Jalen Hurts is busy just throwing into zones, right? Where you're like, well, how is Jalen Hurts not aware that there are guys, like, in these zones? Well, the Chiefs do best against zone defense.
Yeah.
Where their guys can find these holes, sit down, catch the ball like this, instead of, like, running and trying to catch the ball in man-to-man situations, right? Which is what they had to deal with against the Texans. So, like, it's just painful. But, like, I think the right side is probably the Chiefs here. Yeah. Because of all those reasons, right? And it's just like, oh my God, really? Because now all of a sudden we're at a point in our lives here with Kansas City where we're, like, dying to fade them. And I'm like, how did we get here, Shell? You tell me, man. You're the guy who's, like, put me down for the Chiefs every week, right? So, like, how did we get here?
So here's what I'm actually going to say here as I change the pick to the Chiefs. But here's what I'm going to say here. This has more, like, as much as it's, everything you said, I'm with you. I agree with you. I get it. I'm with you. But I'm going to say the changing of the pick still has a lot, like what you did to change my mind here was talk a lot more about the Chargers and what happened in that game against the Eagles. Because that was a lot of bleepery, right?
The
For
most.
the Chargers.
It was so much bleepery. You're like, you're distracted by how much bleepery.
Yeah.
Instead of realizing that, like, the Chargers should be getting blown out here.
And like their quarterback was just taking a lot of hits. And if you think Spags isn't thinking about how he's going to just sit back and just get pressure on Herbert over and over again as well. So yes, listen, through the history of this pod, people know if I'm not on the Chiefs, it's not difficult to get me on the Chiefs. And I understand that might be you're just coming up with another excuse to pick the Chiefs. Cool.
I get it.
But this still has a lot to do with the Chargers as well. And hey, this is why I love this pod. A deep dive conversation into what's going on and finding a different angle here and there of where it might lead you to switching your pick for one reason or another.
And it's understanding that like people are going to be really into the concept of betting on the Chargers in this game, right? Yeah. And the fact that, and again, maybe this ends up going to 3.5, and you just go, oh yeah, like, okay, like that's fine. It just strikes me that that odds makers are just like reopening at 4.5 and are just like, have at it. Like theoretically knowing that, people are hopping on whatever the opposite of a bandwagon is, right? The hearse of the Chiefs here. And by we should mention just quickly, we have to say the words jump and hug game. Right. Because that's, again, you talked about like the history of this podcast. We do have to mention like Jim Harbaugh couldn't have been jumpier or huggier after that win against the Eagles because he knows how important that is. And I always kind of went in that game going like, why are you even playing Justin Herbert? Because this is the more important game. But the importance of this game does kind of fall a little bit backwards when you're able to pull that game out against the Eagles. And I think he knows that if Jalen Hurts was an absolute train wreck in that game, that like they should have lost that game, which would have then put them super vulnerable to the Chiefs being kind of caught for a playoff spot here with having to go to Kansas City on a short week.
Yeah, that last point too. Kansas City on a short week is not a place you want to be at for sure. Pick change, KC minus 4.5. We keep it rolling here, as I know that was a long conversation, but it's okay. We'll get through a couple more of these games.
They'll be
here.
Shorter ones.
We'll go Packers minus 2.5 in Denver taking on the Broncos. This is a big boy game, by the way. Yeah. Broncos keep things rolling, 10 straight wins. Their defense is good. The run game is good. A solid win against the Raiders, where I say Bo Nix kind of looked good. I still don't fully trust them. I still don't really fully trust the Packers, but I got to trust somebody here. The Packers, nice win against the Bears at home. Jordan Love making some plays late in that game. It was a close game, but a win for the Packers. This one's tough here, and I'm going to go down here. My trust level of both of these teams. I have trust issues with both of these teams here.
Sure.
But I feel like I'm less scorned by the Packers so far. Or I still believe in the Packers a little more for whatever reason. They won some bigger games down the little run here, whereas the Broncos have won their 10 games, but haven't really done so looking well in a lot of them. Like they've won, but it's not like they've been, dominating or whatever. Not that that matters, but it just hasn't been as pretty. We'll put it that way. Give me the Packers minus 2.5 on the road, which is a tough ask in Denver. I get it. But I just think the Packers are riding high right now, and it might just be at the right time.
Yeah, I mean, all that's fair, right? But again, we go to the market and we go, okay, is the market realize that the Packers are riding high and potentially at the right time? Like, yeah, the market is very much aware of this, right? And so they are now, I think they're the second favorite for the Super Bowl, but they're definitely the second favorite when it comes to the second-rated team in the betting market, right? And so as we go through, right, the ebbs and flows of the season, where we come into the season, we go, yeah, Packers probably anywhere from 55 to 70. If like everything goes right, like maybe we could see them be that Super Bowl contender and so on and so forth, right? And as we talked about for the first 10 11 weeks 12 weeks maybe, it was all very sort of like underwhelming, right? And then they win, get 3-point underdogs in Detroit on Thanksgiving, and then they win that game last week, and now all of a sudden it's through the time that not only are we back, right, we are back and through the top side of our range. We are at 73.
Oof.
2 sort of rating points, if you will, behind the Rams. And it's like, okay, like off of 2 games, like
And Caleb probably should have
that,
done
by the
better on that last
way,
play.
yes. And we've talked about Caleb Williams being like this super talented guy. You can't win a Heisman without being super talented.
For
Can't be the
sure.
number 1 pick without being super talented. But maybe a guy, at least for now, that is just kind of a bleep up when it
Yeah.
comes to like the high leverage plays. Like you're just sitting there waiting for something to go badly. And if they had just kind of kept running the ball, it felt like they were going to score a touchdown
Yes.
there. It certainly felt like they were going to win the game, or at least have a 2-point conversion try to win the
Mhm.
game. That seemed like the plan. And again, part of that plan is our defense isn't very good and we can't stop the Packers.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, so now the Packers go from playing at home
Hmm.
against a defense that's not very good and couldn't stop them to like, again, people are talking Texans. They're throwing out some of these sort of counting numbers and stuff like that. Yeah, I don't know. We're not going to get a defense on defense battle royal here, throw them in an octagon or ring, but like, I'm still going to take the Broncos defense between
Yeah.
those 2 teams as the best defense in the NFL. Now that, especially now that Patrick Surtain is back. And so I don't think you're going to get the bomb deep down the field, multiple sort of, scores that way. I don't think you're going to get the Josh Jacobs, like Marshawn Lynch treatment, like over and over and over and it being successful. Meanwhile, like the Broncos, you just mentioned, like all they do is just win the games. To me, this is the same thing as when the Broncos played the Chiefs. And
Mhm.
everybody was like, yeah, but like they're not blowing these teams out. You mentioned it, man. Like, yeah, it was one of the most ridiculous backdoor covers like of all time against the Raiders last week. And so they didn't cover the number. But if
Yeah.
you tune in at the start of the 4th quarter, the Broncos were
It's a wrap.
doing the thing that everybody wanted the Broncos to do, and they were doing so on the road. They were pounding a team. They had, 3 drives, I think, of over 75 yards. Like they were doing the thing everybody wanted them to do. And just because things got weird at the end, like doesn't change the fact that they did the thing that people wanted them to do. And by the way, like we talked about this also, like the Broncos are the Eagles, where unless Jalen Hurts throws a million interceptions, if the game is that type of game where it's -2.5, +2.5, like yada, 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 and we want a team that can just win the game, the Broncos are that team. And so I don't, again, I understand because I just explained how the betting market has been super psyched about the Packers and still hasn't cracked 60 for the Broncos. They
Yeah.
win all of the games and they have not cracked a rating of 60. This is a betting market that was accepting of the Colts going through 60
It's
in the
true.
first like 8 games of the season, has widely been cool with the Patriots going through 60 from a rating perspective into that contender level. And they're still not into the Broncos.
Hmm.
And so, like, if you want to have like a chip on your shoulder, like, how about being a team in the number 1 seed in the AFC who is really going to have to screw some things up to not keep that number 1, seed, being a home underdog here to, again, a Packers team that, has been nice in the last couple of weeks, but it's been against some pretty compromised defenses in pretty sort of comfy conditions. Like you can say, oh, they went on the road against Detroit. It's like, yeah, indoors. You're gonna go up to Denver and like slug it out with this defense. I love the Broncos in this game, man. Love them.
That gong you hear
Oh, baby.
means the pick has been changed to the Denver Broncos, and it's that home field advantage. It's that difficult place to play. It's that A++ defense. If the Broncos are the team to top the AFC, this is a game that you show up in. And I also think this goes back to something we've been talking about all season long, which is these 2.5-point spreads. We see them way more than we see the 3. And if I'm
Mhm.
being honest with myself, if this number was 3, I'd be on the Broncos. But we don't
That's right.
see 3, right? And I've reminded, if you listen to this pod every week,
Yeah.
week in, week out, you've heard me say this multiple times where I have to remind myself that we don't see the 3s that often, right? But
Yeah.
we got to sort of think about these 2.5s almost as if it's a 3. No, but I'm saying
Well,
like for me, for
yeah,
myself, for
no, I
myself. I'm
agree
not
with
saying for
you.
everyone else. I'm just saying for
Yeah.
me. Like I know if that said 3 points, I wouldn't even be questioning it. Do you
Yeah.
know what I mean?
Well, no, what I was going to say was when you see 3, it's more often going to go to 3.5.
Correct.
Because when you see 3, it's sort of become this thing where I think odds makers know that if there's a 3 available and there's sort of any case to be
Everyone's
made for
jumping
the
on it.
underdog, yeah, that they're going to grab that +3 and sort of ask questions later.
Yeah.
And so they don't even start with 3. They start with
Yeah.
2.5. And
Yeah.
they go, all right, like if we're super wrong about this and you're going to bet us up to 3, then we'll sort of like, deal with it. To me, it's more like if a line should be 3.5, they kind of started at 3
Mhm.
and they go, all right, you want to take that
We'll
+3?
take all the money on the way
Fine.
up. Yeah.
Fine. What we don't want to do is offer you 3.5, and then you're taking that +3.5, and now we're in big trouble if the game lands on 3.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
It's this very sort of kind of unique scenario that I think is if there's anything to sort of say about the modern era of betting and odds making and market making and all that kind of stuff, it's that like you said, the 3s are no longer around, and when they are, they get grabbed for the underdog.
Mhm.
Right. And
Mhm.
that's the change that I think we've seen, right? Where people are more into taking the underdog than they are the favorite, or at least that's sort of evening out a lot more in people's just general, sort of
Yeah.
mindset, right? Taking the points is become more pervasive than just looking at teams going like, oh, this team could win by 6, so -5.5 doesn't seem like much. And then you watch the game and it's 3 points, 4 points, 3 points, 4 points, and and you don't cover, right? So yeah, like I just kind of look at it and I go, yeah, that's, to me, if you're getting a +3 opportunity, it's kind of like terrifying.
Yeah. No, definitely with you
It's just
there
weird.
for sure. We move on to the Rams, who are hosting the Lions as 5.5 point favorites. The Rams just smashed the Cards last week. And when I say smash the Cards, it was down 7-0 early. And
Mhm.
then just, yeah, Puka doing everything. Matthew Stafford back to his MVP. I think that's what we literally said in our preview last week heading into
Yeah.
that game, that it was bounce back time for Matthew Stafford's MVP run after a stumble the week prior against Carolina. And that's what happened. And now they're 5.5 point favorites against the Lions, which I think to me feels like too much. And because it's a 5.5, that has me on the Lions here. I'm going to gobble up the 5.5 points, as this is one of those games where, it's the Lions on the road, but it's Jared Goff on the road in a dome, which I'm going to be okay with taking Jared Goff on the road
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
a dome. And they're on their fast track. And last week, wasn't expecting Amon-Ra St. Brown to be in the lineup. And then magically before the game starts, I think it's Laura Rutledge doing the update. And she's like, guess what? Maybe I got my primetime game wrong, my primetime sideline reporter wrong. But my
You
point is, we
might.
get the
Yeah.
update.
Yeah.
Hey, guess who's playing? He's in. He's warming up. He feels good. And I'm just like, no. Poor Cowboys.
Yeah.
Anyways,
Yeah.
give me the points with the Lions here at the +5.5. This just comes down to when I can get the high-powered offense getting 5.5 points. Most often than not, I'm going to lean there, even if it is against a tough defense like the Rams.
Yeah, and I think that's the sort of issue, right? Where it's like, are the Lions going to be able to run on the Rams? But the Rams have one of the better run defenses.
Yeah. Yeah.
So then you go, all right, well, like, how do you keep up then, right? And does it turn into a Jared Goff, who, by the way, if there was a guy sort of familiar with Jared Goff's work, Sean McVay, right? And
Nice.
so you go, oh man, like when you think about it like that, and we've seen this matchup before, right? And so
Yeah.
I think the sort of research that's going to be kind of required over the next few days for me is all right, how has Jared Goff done in these games against the Rams? And what did he have available to him? What did Stafford have available to him? What did the Rams defense have available to them? Because when I look at the Lions defense, we had another injury situation last week, right? Brian
Oh,
Branch,
yeah.
arguably one of their best D-backs going down last week. We've got Kirby Joseph questionable for this game, and again, a couple of guys who are been on IR for a couple of weeks right now. And then again, you got the Lions offensive line. They're trying to get Frank Ragnow out of retirement. He comes in and then immediately fails the physical, and it's like, well, that's not going to work. Right, back to the drawing board. And again, watching that game against the Cowboys last week, right, like what percentage of that game was certain members of the Cowboys kind of not showing up, not realizing, or it not being
Oof.
instilled in them from like a leadership perspective that was their season. And you can say, well, we're not mathematically eliminated and we're going to start, trying now. But one of the complaints that I think we've always kind of had with the Cowboys, going back to like the Mike McCarthy era and Jason Garrett and things of that nature, is that like, can you put together 2 or 3, 4, 5 solid games in a row?
How do you handle success?
How do you handle success? And so they don't. And so you go, all right, how much of that was the Lions and how much of that was the Cowboys? And so, again, it's going to be so much more difficult for the Lions offense than it was against the Cowboys, who again sort of had that like glimmer back of whatever the opposite of a glimmer is, I guess, right? Of back to the Cowboys' bad defense. And, again, part of it is like maybe I'm just kind of tired of, not that I'm doing it every week by any means, but like I don't really want anything to do with betting against the Rams.
Yeah.
Because they show up every week. Even when they lose that game to the Panthers, like we talked about last week, it was a fluke, right? That game was the fluke, the high leverage plays that went there the wrong way, fourth down touchdowns, the fourth down long touchdowns for the Panthers, the interceptions from Stafford, et cetera, et cetera. And so, like, yeah, otherwise it's Puka Nacua every single game making just an absurd catch that, like, imagine if that guy was on the Chiefs, right? Like the catches, but Patrick Mahomes wouldn't know what to do with himself. He's like, look at all the catches my receiver's making. So, again, like these guys, they're so good. And, again, they might lose a couple of games. Hell, they might lose this game because things might go a little awry here. So, yeah, I get it, man. Like the points are a little bit scary. And I think it's going to come down to whether Goff can throw against the Rams, whether the Lions are going to be able to protect against the Rams defensive line. I would say right now on Wednesday sort of morning here, I'm not really all that hopeful for the Lions offense. Meanwhile, in the context of like keeping up with what the Rams should be able to do. And so when you look back and go, well, we had that same sort of attitude last week with the Cowboys. You know what? When that flag went down on Jake Ferguson for offensive pass interference, and I think we all thought it was defensive pass interference with sort of the hook and turn, because as you and I talk about every week, like we watch these games, I know what a penalty looks like. I know what a defensive pass interference looks like. I know what an offensive pass interference looks like. That wasn't that. That was a defensive pass interference that they called offensive PI on. And so if you give the Cowboys a first down sort of inside the 10-yard line there, do we get at least a backdoor cover potentially? Yeah. Right on the 3, or at least a push for those who had 3. And so again, like the Lions are going to look pretty good at home when they show up, having just lost. They're going to look pretty good against the Cowboys. And so I don't want to get sort of like, bogged down by the idea that like the Lions are quote unquote back. Because I look at the depth chart on defense and I look at sort of what the offensive line has sort of been bringing to the table. And I go like, this seems like a really bad matchup against Matthew Stafford and the Rams defensive line. Because again, while they lost to the Panthers, I still don't know what the negative, what the hole is on the Rams. I don't know what the bad part of the Rams is. I haven't found that yet.
Yeah. And the important part here for me as there you go. You got the gong here.
Yeah.
Rams minus 5.5. But the big thing here for me is what you mentioned about the matchups. And I think, you need your best. This sounds like the most obvious analysis here for why I'm changing my pick. But you might need your best DBs to cover Puka Nacua and Devontae Adams and the MVP favorite QB in Matthew Stafford. That might be things that you want to have there. The other part is between the Rams and Seahawks, I've had very little fear in them covering spreads for the last like month and a half. Do you know what I mean? Like they're just rolling. So being talked into taking the Rams by less than a touchdown. Okay, fair enough. I could do that. Yeah. I can do that. Let's keep going here to a team that, maybe at other points I needed to be talked into taking, but in this instance, we got the Saints at home as 2.5-point underdogs to the Panthers. Now, this is a very easy analysis for me here. The Panthers by 2.5 points on the road against anybody. I'm not about that life. I'm just not. Now, add into the fact that you've been preaching to me, Mr. Tyler Shuck isn't as bad as people are making him out to be for about a month now. And now I'm starting to hear more and more chatter about that exact same thing.
Yeah,
you've been saying into a microphone on these airwaves for about a month.
That's right. Yeah.
I'm just spitting the facts here. Massive run by Shuck. Like he just making plays, good throws, good runs, just making winning plays last week against the Bucs. Not only did they cover the 8.5 points, but they outright won. something else that you heard here on this pod last week. But their defense also playing well. You add that all up, and you tell me they're at home. And again, the Panthers being favored by 2.5 points against anybody.
Yeah.
This is one where I don't need to see the 3. Give me the 2.5 points. Let's go.
I mean, so first of all, right, part of the thing with betting is understanding like when you have a bias, when you come into something with a bias and being able to label that in a pretty obvious way. Well, as we talked about with regards to Tampa Bay, right, one of my biases here is like I want Carolina to win the division.
Yes.
I want Carolina to win the division. Yeah. I want Dave Canales to be considered for coach of the year, and I would like Tetairoa McMillan to win rookie of the year. If all of those things happen, I'm going to be a very pleased individual, right?
Correct.
And therefore, you're going to need to win a road game at some point, and this would be sort of the best chance for you to do that because for all as much as we're all mother shuckers, wait, what? This is the team you need to beat. And the frustrating part with Carolina is because they either like win these games we don't think that they're going to win, or they get blown out, and it's just like it's this complete mess with regards. But of course we already saw them lose to the Saints at home, so it's a very easy look to be like, oh yeah, by the way, that whole thing about like Carolina being like 0-12 in their last 12 times that they've been favored, which is over the course of like 5 years because of how rarely they've been favored lately. All of that sort of adds up, right? And if again everybody was just betting the Saints because of those factors, then the Panthers would no longer be favored, right? Like all of that money would sort of come in. So I think I have to sort of say, like, to me this is actually Panthers or nothing. Because they are definitively the better team. The Shuck stuff was really awesome last week, and the Shuck stuff in general is so funny because the Saints, more than any other like bad team over the last like 5, 6, 10 years maybe, have done more to sort of kick the can down the road with a hope to just compete next season. Right? They're like, we are not rebuilding. We refuse. And it's like everything gets kind of kicked down the road. Like Alvin Kamara is still on the team, right? Like all, these different guys are still, Cameron Jordan is still on the team. And it's all just because like, well, maybe next year, like we'll keep contending, or we'll keep trying to sort of contend. And they draft Tyler Shuck in the second round. There's some measurables there. Obviously, highly touted guy going to Oregon. He ends up at Texas Tech and then Louisville, right? The point is, he's like 27 years old. It's like a Brandon Whedon situation with sort of how old he is. But it's like they do so because they're like, we need a guy who can play like next season.
Yeah.
We need a guy who's old enough. Like, we don't want a 20-year-old project. We need a 25-year-old who can play next season. And that doesn't really have anything to do with the handicap here, but I just sort of think about how sort of funny it is that people are like surprised that he's good. But it's like the whole point was like, it's got to happen. It's got to happen now for the Saints, except for the fact that like they are by and large a bad team pretty much everywhere else. Right. Yeah. And it's like, yeah, you can keep trying to contend, but like, you're not. You haven't for like a few years, right? You can do the Derek Carr thing for a couple of years. So I mean, that's not really helping anybody necessarily with regards to like the handicap for this game. For me, it's more just like maybe it's enough for me from a betting perspective to have those 3 sort of futures get augmented in equity and value by the Panthers just winning this game rather than laying the points with the Panthers, which is basically a terrible idea anytime it's done in, modern society.
Yeah. No, definitely hear you. Definitely understand. It's an interesting one for sure. And, that whole division has just been a gong show. I mean, not even just this season. It's been an on-running bit really in that division. So why wouldn't that continue? And listen, I'm just going to take the points. Just taking the points, man.
Yeah.
Sure. We got the Seahawks laying 13.5 points against the Colts here. And I am on the Seahawks. I kind of hinted at this earlier. The Colts might just be cooked. Daniel Jones might not have legs left. I mean, all the injuries he's dealing with now on both legs. They've signed Phil Rivers to their practice squad, which I thought was a joke. Like I had ESPN up. I was at work, the volume's down, ESPN's on, and I saw the graphic pop up that said breaking news.
Yeah.
Philip Rivers to be added to the practice roster. And I thought it was a joke, mostly because while they're having a conversation, the camera cuts to Swagoo, and he just had like the funniest look on his face. Like it was the biggest meme ever. But he was like, wait, what?
Yeah.
It's so funny to see the real-time reaction. It was so good. I say all that to say, I got to see who's playing QB for the Colts before I'm like betting on them to not lose by 2 touchdowns to the aforementioned team, the Seahawks, where I just said I've been riding with them to just dummy teams for about a month now, and they continue to just dummy teams. So whether it's Riley Leonard, who I'm being told is banged up already, Anthony Richardson, who hurt himself with workout equipment, like what are we doing here?
Yeah,
and I guess it can't be Phil Rivers because that'd be too soon. But whatever it is, I can't have any parts of the Colts right now. I just can't do it. Can't do it. Won't do it.
So that's all well and good, and you're right, because I think there's a different calculus depending on who the quarterback is, because I'm trying to figure out what the sort of correct line is supposed to be depending on what quarterback is supposed to be in there. And there's 3 options for the Colts. I mean, we have to start with the 4th option that's not an option, which is what the line would have been with Daniel Jones, right?
Okay.
And so, who knows what happens with the rest of that game, if Daniel Jones is healthy, if it's a competitive game against the Jaguars, and so on and so forth. The Seahawks, like, constantly playing backup quarterbacks is frustrating, right? And you mentioned like you're betting on the Seahawks to like keep dummying teams. It's like, yeah, well, when like Kirk Cousins, obviously technically a backup, you go back to Max Brosmer, you can go retroactive to like Spencer Rattler is now a backup that like if time worked
he's in
reverse.
He was always a backup.
Right. And so like, while he was the starter at the time, he sort of retroactively a backup. Jacoby Brissett, right? It's not even Kyler Murray. Again, I don't even know if that's a backup situation either, but like it's just funny that these guys that they keep playing. And then it's like, oh yeah, by the way, the Titans are thrown into that mix. And of course they took a 30-10 lead there, couldn't hang on for the cover because the number was so big. And I think that's kind of the point here, because the number is so big. So let's work backwards. So we start with 3.5 being the look ahead line for this game. And that was the Daniel Jones number before he blew out his Achilles.
Yeah.
So again, even if you wanted to go to 4, 4.5 based on the results from last week, I think that would have been, I think it's a situation where if Daniel Jones is healthy and we're getting 4 points, even on the road against Seattle, like we'd probably be interested in the Colts.
I'd think about it.
Right. So maybe the number is 3.5 that we need to sort of start that point at. So then we go, all right, looks like it's going to be Riley Leonard. So when the number reopens on Sunday night, when we think it's Riley Leonard, because he made it to the end of that game against the Jags, the number is 11.5.
Oh.
So it's worth mentioning for those who don't know, who don't follow college football, Riley Leonard played a ton of college football. He played 2 or 3 seasons at Duke and then did so well enough that Notre Dame was like, hey, we got a good team next year. We don't have a quarterback. This is essentially pick of the litter. We're going to grab you, transfer portal, pay some money, be our quarterback. Notre Dame makes it to the final of the college football playoff. Yeah. Pretty good, right? Like high leverage scenarios, et cetera, et cetera. Was it all on the sort of arm of Riley Leonard? Like, was he slinging it around? No, it wasn't a high octane passing offense by any stretch, but enough to get him on the roster for the Colts, right? Again, not necessarily a top draft pick by any stretch of the imagination. So then he comes in and he plays, and you watch him for a bit, and it's such a tough spot, right? Because A, he comes in while they're trailing. B, a deluge hits Jacksonville, right? Like Florida in general got hit with that. You can make the case that jammed up the Buccaneers, but everybody's playing in the same on the same field. So I go, okay, if it's 11.5, that's like 8-point literal like point spread shift to Riley Leonard. I'm like, oh man, that seems like a lot when you have the offensive line that the Colts have, where in theory you can get by to a degree by just handing the ball to Jonathan Taylor, right? We'll see whether Sauce Gardner plays, right? We'll, what kind of defense necessarily the Colts necessarily have. So then we find out that Riley Leonard is sort of questionable for the game. And then we find out that Phil Rivers is an option. And I didn't have that same reaction because, again, if you're super deep into this, a couple of things. One, that Phil Rivers has been working.
Stays ready.
Stays ready, man. Like that he's worked out with all of these guys, including Daniel Jones, I think including Sam Darnold. And so all of these guys, and like there's tweets in the offseason about like, oh, they have these throwing competitions and like Phil Rivers wins them. And it's like, yeah, I mean, I don't think anybody's issue is ever Phil Rivers' arm strength necessarily, but again, the other thing being because I know that Shane Steichen, before he was the offensive coordinator with the Eagles, he was the offensive coordinator with the Chargers. Now, I'll be honest with you, I wasn't really psyched about how his offense was coordinated when he was at the Chargers, and so his general success and evolution and rise up the rankings to the point where he was a head coach, frankly, was a bit of a surprise to me. And so, but I at least know of the relationship. And so if the two questions are, can Phil Rivers throw the football and can Phil Rivers run Shane Steichen's offense based on the familiarity that he has with it? I think those two answers are yes. Now they sign him to the practice squad. They don't sign him officially to the main roster. Yeah. And so we don't know. But the problem is you then go to the depth chart. And so part of it is Riley Leonard good enough to start from a health perspective? Is he good enough to be the backup if he's not good enough to start? And at what point does then he have to go off the roster and Rivers comes on the roster? Or do they go with a 3 quarterback system? And you're counting right now going, wait a minute, 3 quarterbacks? I got Riley Leonard. I got Phil Rivers. Shell, do you know who the 3rd quarterback is in this mix for the Colts?
Not Anthony Richardson?
No, because he's still on IR.
Oh, yeah, he's on IR. Sorry. We went through that. Yes.
The workout himself in the face.
Yeah. Jeez. No, I do not know who the 3rd quarterback is.
That sound you hear is Brett Rippon's music.
I did know that. No, I didn't know that. I did know that.
A guy who at 29, 7th season, has started games or at least been in games with Denver, 3 different years with Denver.
Yeah.
The Rams, he played 2 games, completed 18 passes on 38 attempts, below 50% completion percentage. That's grim. And then he got into 1 game, this season, he's got into a game. Didn't have a pass, got sacked once, though, which is an amazing stat line. For his time with the Bengals, Brett Rippon, he was involved this season. And so, okay, Riley Leonard, 11 and a half, Notre Dame quarterback, like a lot of experience, recently. It's not like he hasn't played in 2 or 3 years. Then you've got Rivers, and you mentioned, like, is it too soon? It's like, I'm sorry, how is it too soon for a guy who's 45 years old? Like, it needs to be now. Like there's no like wait on it. It's like it needs to happen right now. And so, now the line's 13 and a half, right? And so, whether you want to talk about that's 2 more points on the point spread, that's a full 10-point difference from Daniel Jones. And then we can start having the conversation about how much of the Colts offense was Daniel Jones and how much, you know what I mean? And how much it was valid. Like sort of the other pieces. And so you go, okay, well, like this current rating, what does that make the Colts out of in the NFL? Any guesses, Shell? Literally, there's no wrong guesses here.
No, they got to be like a 38.
It's 27.
Oh,
27 is their current rating. 38 was more like a little bit closer to the Riley Leonard. If it was definitely him and he was healthy and the line was 11 and a half, that puts it at about 35.
Okay.
Right. Pretty significant downgrade from 61 or 62, which I should have mentioned. It was where the Colts were, right? As we talked about earlier, with sort of blasting through the 60 range. And so, like, we're talking about a 60 down to like a 35 with Leonard, down to the current whoever is going to start ether of 27, which puts you right alongside your Saints, the Raiders, and ahead of the Titans. And so I guess the question is, which quarterback... Whichever one starts, then the question becomes, are the Colts now the Raiders? Are the Colts now the Saints?
So I would almost, hold on. I would almost frame this another way.
Okay.
Because I think you're on the right track and how you're getting me to, like, I don't think I'm going to change this pick just because it's a Seahawks.
I'm not even sure I'm asking you to change.
No. For sure. Because what I was going to say is this is more about the Colts going forward more so than it is about this week. But what's making me think about this is just how much do I really value Daniel Jones and what he was doing to this team? More so than like, are the Colts versus those other teams? It's just like, what was Daniel Jones's value? Because I think he was doing really well. He was doing a solid job. but it's not like he was Matthew Stafford out here. You know what I mean? It's not like he's Josh Allen out here.
Mm-hmm.
And so that to me might be the biggest difference in terms of their rating can't fall from 60s into the 20s.
Right.
Just because of whoever you're putting in at QB.
That's a comparable fall. And actually, it's even more of a fall than the Lamar Jackson and a bunch of the other guys that got hurt, right?
Yeah.
That first week where it was like Jackson's out and half the defense is out.
Yeah.
And they went from 64 to 31, right?
Yeah.
And that seems a little like too much. And, it either was or it wasn't, sort of depending on how you view those games that they played. But yeah, it is sort of a referendum on Daniel Jones. And if and it's funny because you got Riley Leonard who does provide an option with regards to his running ability.
Mm-hmm.
Right. He does have some running ability, whereas Phil Rivers has none. But Daniel Jones didn't really have any running ability once he broke his friggin' left leg.
Yeah.
So the Rivers comes in if he does, and he's probably he's like Daniel Jones with a broken leg, right? From a mobility perspective.
Can I say I just need Phil Rivers to play?
I do too, man. And that's the other part, right? Where it's like if Phil Rivers, and so by the way, this is again, speaking of stay ready, I think this whole conversation is kind of stay ready, because if it's stay ready, Phil Rivers is starting and the market is like, no, we're going to 14 and a half.
Oh,
and we're getting that. Then yeah, I might, right? Whereas if it's Riley Leonard, and I think it should probably go back to 11 and a half. Mm-hmm. But if it stays at 13 and a half with Riley Leonard, I might.
I understand. Yeah.
Whereas if it's neither of those two options and it's Brett Rippon, who doesn't have the knowledge and Hall of Fame credentials of Phil Rivers, and he doesn't have the youthful exuberance and recent experience of Riley Leonard.
Yeah.
I don't want anything to do with the Colts in that situation.
Yes. No, I'm with you.
I don't care what the number is. Right? I don't care what the number is.
Yeah. No, totally fair enough. And again, this is one where obviously we're recording this on Wednesday. So if you're making a pick on this game, make sure you know who the starting quarterback is on Sunday. That's the overall message provided here.
Yeah. Find out the quarterback and then go back to this clip and then just run through the last 8 minutes of what we talked about and then go, okay, so how does that match up, right? It's okay, the Rivers part and it's 14. Okay, wait, no, it's Rippon and it's 16, but nobody wants Rippon and, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, it's the NFL in December, dude.
Yep. We are here. Yeah. And speaking of, we got the Bears laying 7.5 points at home to the Cleveland Browns. It says here Browns plus 7.5, but that's just more based off principle of the 7.5.
Yeah.
I'll continue. I'll explain a little more because the Titans last week were able to run the ball on the Browns. I was kind of surprised at that. Shador had a pretty solid game. I was also surprised by that. But then I remember they're playing against the Titans defense, which is horrible. Now enter the Bears. The Bears come in, and the Bears were very close. We talked about this already. Very close to beating Green Bay, and slow start before getting things going. Can they run the ball against the Cleveland defense? That will be my biggest question here. How will Caleb hold up against Myles Garrett and that Browns pass rush? That's my question here. The Bears secondary really isn't that good, but also how much am I buying into Shador? I just have a lot of questions here. And oftentimes when I have a lot of questions, I'm going to lean to take the points. That's going to be my starting point to open up this conversation. Cause I didn't watch that Titans Browns game in depth. It was on in the background on one of the two TVs with, a bunch of other stuff going on as mentioned.
Yeah.
But 7.5 points just seems like a lot for me to be laying with the Bears.
Well, great news, Shell. I watched that game in depth on Sunday. I watched that game quite a bit in depth.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I was on the Titans contest. I was on Titans money line. I was deep into the Titans scene, and that game was we're now into college football bowl
Titans
season, right?
Dub. And big dub.
And and there's going to be a bowl game or two where the teams are just scoring back and forth, and it's 38-35, and you're like, I got an eggnog going. Not me, because eggnog's gross, but like you, or human beings, because somebody's got to be buying this stuff. You got an
Gotta try
eggnog
the
going.
eggnog cut water this Christmas.
Okay, I mean we're just off the rails at this. What? No follow-ups. No, that never even happened. Yeah, the fire's going to be roaring. You're going to be like, this is the most fun I've ever had in my life, right? 38-35 in the fourth quarter. Like, what a great time. And it's like, yeah, these two teams finished the season 6-6. Neither of them are any good. And so that's what the Titans and Browns was last week, right? Because it's like, oh, Tony Pollard is having the game of his life. It's like, do you think that's because Tony Pollard got great all of a sudden, or because like the defense, which by the way, like it was almost a little too perfect because the Browns were they lost one of their defensive tackles the previous week.
Yeah.
It's like, well, yeah, like it's a lot of times they'll be like, oh, they're missing this defensive tackle. Like, are they going to be able to stop the run? And the answer was just like, no, they're not. And it's like kind of weirdly perfect from like a handicap perspective. I thought that the Titans, on the Titans side of things, that their defense from a run game perspective was going to shut down the quote unquote only thing that the Browns can do, which is run Quinshon Judkins. Because the only thing that the Titans can do is play run defense because of Jeffrey Simmons in the middle there. What I wasn't prepared for was for the Titans to basically, I don't think it was exclusive, because how could it be? But like run man-to-man defense in pass coverage. Yeah. Which is like the only thing that Shedeur Sanders like can have success against, right? Like if one of the knocks on Shedeur Sanders is like can't read zone coverages and and whatever, and it's like, yeah, okay, let's not do that. Let's not do any zone coverages then.
Yeah,
and it's like, well, wait, are you trying to win? Like this is how teams tank, by the way. Right? It's not the players on the field. It's schematically going, the only way Shedeur Sanders is going to beat us is if we just run man-to-man and he gets to sort of throw it up for guys like Harold Fannin and David Njoku and Jerry Jeudy and stuff like that. And they break a couple of big plays, and all of a sudden, like, Shedeur Sanders has 350 passing yards. And so, I look at it and I go, I think these both teams are really bad. And we just had the Bears playing these like showdown games, right? Where they obviously beat the Eagles and then comported themselves nicely, I would say, in Lambeau Field. Mm-hmm. But like, and this is kind of the reverse of the Broncos thing. Like, if this is a bad team going to play a good team, then the good team should blow this bad team out.
Fair. Yeah.
And so to me, this is actually kind of more of a referendum, if you will, or at least as much of a referendum on what the Bears are. In that, like, can they just blow this team out? Can they just run a bunch of borderline complex zone pass coverages to confuse Shedeur? Or are they just going to get run on by Quinshon Judkins, right? So these are the questions that we kind of have to ask ourselves over the next few days, because at 7.5, I mean, it's kind of like that like 3-point thing that we were talking about. Well, plus 7.5 looks pretty good. Shedeur Sanders looks pretty good. And it's like, I watched all that game, man, and it all kind of seemed, I don't want to say fluky, but like really set up nicely for Shedeur to be able to have that big game. And I think the bigger issue is like the Browns are capable of giving up 30 plus points to the Titans because Tony Pollard can run through everybody. Like, what are the Bears? What's the Bears run game? Kyle Monangai and DeAndre Swift going to be able to do against the Bears run defense if the Titans were going to have that level of success? Now, again, overall, they didn't have that much offensive success. I still think the Titans still had under 300 yards, right? And the Browns had like over 400 and still managed to lose, which again might be another indictment about the Browns, that if you can outgain a team by 200 yards and still lose at home, and by the way, that team is the Titans. I don't know, dude. We're looking to have them play again if the Bears are a good team. Like again, if we think the Bears are on the sort of, not maybe the level of, but like at least in the same realm of the Packers. I mean, again, they beat the Eagles on the road. They got to be good enough for that. Like, this seems like one where they should probably blow them out. But again, like, it's not like I loved what I saw from the Bears' run defense as Josh Jacobs, like Marshawn Lynch them over and over and over again last week. It's tough. It's tough.
It's a tough one, but this is one where I'm checking myself here on the fact the pick has been changed. I'm checking myself here on the fact that I've hated on the Bears for a lot of this season. Mm-hmm. I'm being honest with myself. Sure. Yeah, this is one where it's like, hey, show me, Bears, that you can actually do something here. And, we'll see where the chips lay. at the end of this game. And I was going to say, we'll see where the chips lay at the end of our next game, but I mean, really doesn't matter because we're talking about the Giants and the Commanders. And the Giants are 2.5-point favorites at home against said Commanders. And I was talking about biases in the previous game. This is a bias I'm coming in with because I'm just absolutely disgusted by the performance put on by the Washington Commanders last week as they got waxed by JJ McCarthy and the Vikings last week. Jaden got banged up again. I'm assuming got to be out after he looked very rusty when he was in. And, I'm sure the talk about whether, their fan base up in arms about why are you playing him? Season's over. Should he play? Should he not play? All that fun stuff. All of it is just bad. All of it is bad. He's not in.
Yeah, he's out.
We got the Giants at 2.5-point favorites, which I don't really like, but this maybe falls into the same narrative of if this was 3, would I be more likely to take the Commanders here? Right? Like, would I be talking myself into Marcus Mariota? He's already played. He's already done okay with this team. Like, I don't know. The Commanders are just so bad, just in all facets of the game last week, that this is just a stench that's remaining for another week. And as much as I try to forget about it, at least the Giants are coming off a bye. Maybe they've buttoned some things up, to use our term here. Yeah. Give me the Giants laying the 2.5.
So the thing with the NFL, right? Like, who had the stench last week? Minnesota Vikings had the stench, Shell.
They did.
The stench from getting shut out in Seattle with the Max Brosner fiasco, et cetera, et cetera. And my case for being on the Vikings, kind of regardless of the number, because the number was all over the place, right? Where it flopped from was it Washington was the favorite, then Minnesota became the favorite, then Washington became the favorite again. Right? It was kind of all over the map because, again, in the end, Jaden Daniels playing boosted the Commanders' market rating to the point where they would be the road favorite in that game. Yeah. And all the while, for me, it was, JJ McCarthy, not very good, like super inconsistent, And when I say super inconsistent, that's being kind of kind to him. And then going but the market hasn't gone back to where it left off with JJ McCarthy, which wasn't very high, right? But it just hadn't gotten back to that low point. And so therefore the Vikings were underrated. Now, did I know that the Vikings were going to have a really nice game? And did I know that the Commanders were not going to have a nice game? No, not necessarily. Right? I didn't think it would be that easy, but I was pretty convicted on the idea that the Vikings win that game. Part of that is because I'm unsold. Again, not necessarily his fault. He's been banged up all season long. He's been in and out. The idea that Jaden Daniels coming back was just going to sort of elevate the Commanders again just never really seemed sort of to jive.
Fix everything.
Right? I think right now, if he's playing every week, and again, maybe there's a little off week there and it's kind of jamming him up a bit, but who knows? I think the Commanders are a better team with Marcus Mariota than with Jaden Daniels kind of flopping in and out, right? And so it was about 15 minutes ago. I just checked it. They announced Jaden Daniels will not play this week, so it is going to be Mariota. And so when the market rating for the Commanders goes down because Marcus Mariota is put in, sending the Giants line up to 2.5, which, by the way, speaking of flopping with regards to who the favorite was, the look-ahead line for this last week was Commanders -2 on the road. So you lose that game in the way that you do, and again, you get the stink. And so the Commanders in this situation are kind of the new Vikings. It's I love, this favorite sort of random movie from the 90s, right? This movie called Fallen, Denzel Washington movie, where this spirit travels from one person to another because it touches them. Mm-hmm. Right? Like if I touch you and the spirit the devil kind of goes from me to you. Yeah. It's kind of like that, man, where if you have the stink on you and you beat another team, that team then gets the stink. Well, guess who's getting the stink next week? It's the New York Giants are getting the stink. And you know what? I think the Giants are totally cool with getting the stink because the Giants are 2-11. Yep. They are tied right now for dead last with the Raiders and the Titans.
Okay.
The Commanders are lurking at 3-10, along with a collective of other teams: Browns, Cardinals, Jets. Is there any other? Oh, Saints. So a win here for the Giants is a abject catastrophe. But
Okay.
if you're like, you know what? I remember him saying, this is the point, like, to like last season, where I said a Giants win here down the stretch is an abject catastrophe. It's because I did say that. And yet these fools went out and beat the Colts handily in week 17, 45-33, and thus costing them significant placement in the upcoming NFL draft. And I don't know what's going to happen with regards to Jackson Dart and Cam Ward. You could tell me Jackson Dart ends up having the better career, and all of this ended up being sort of A-OK. You get Abdul Carter as well. Again, who knows what the deal is with that dude as far as like what his career is necessarily going to be. I don't think the Giants need to have the number one pick because they need to get a new quarterback. I think the Giants need to have the number one pick because they need better players on the roster. And whether that means grabbing somebody with the number one pick or trading out of the number one pick. And so if the one takeaway from last year was you idiots won a game to knock us down the NFL draft board more than any of these other teams, they have literally done this before. Then the deal is you cannot win any more games. And so again, like some of these, Titans are still trying because they have the number, they have their quarterback theoretically of the future. And again, you can make the case that the Giants do too, and that they need to keep trying and so on and so forth. I don't know, man. Like, I watched that Monday night game against the Patriots. You've seen a lot of football in your day. When a team is down 2 touchdowns, 3 touchdowns in the second half, what do? They sit back and they throw it around, and their quarterback throws it 40, 45 times because they try their hardest to come back and win the game.
Yeah.
What did we see in that game? We saw a lot of Devin Singletary and Tyron Tracy and a lot of run game and whatever. And again, maybe you can make the case, listen, we're just trying to keep Jackson Dart alive. We're trying to keep him upright. I would make the case that you weren't making a particular effort to try to win a football game in that situation. And so meanwhile, the Commanders, oldest team in the league, right? Like none of these dudes care. Marcus Mariota doesn't care about getting a better draft pick. Dan Quinn, I don't think cares about getting a better draft pick.
Yeah.
Right? They got Jaden Daniels. We're just trying to keep him alive, right? They're fine in the quarterback position. And so I just look at it and I go, the reason the Commanders are not considered the better team is because of one game that they played last week. The previous week, and you and I talked about it last week, they had a jump and hug loss against the Denver Broncos. They looked pretty good against the Denver Broncos the previous week. And so I just look at it and it's a bummer that Zach Ertz gets out, but like, are we moving lines because Zach Ertz blew out his ACL? It's a bummer from like a story perspective. It sucks that it doesn't appear that Jaden Daniels is going to play the rest of the season from like an entertainment perspective, but it doesn't make the Commanders any worse than they were 2 weeks ago. They just went in against a Minnesota team that it was playing, as we talked about last week, the easiest opponent they've played basically all season. And so JJ McCarthy looked good enough, and they were able to run the football, and the defense played well. The defense that we've always kind of felt was still pretty decent. And they won the game. They took a big lead, and they were able to salt that away. And so I'm not calling like the Commanders the worst team in the NFL, which honestly is kind of what I would need to call a team if they're going to be underdogs to the Giants anywhere on planet Earth, even if that means it's New York, as if like the Giants' home record has been any good over these last few seasons. So yeah, man, I'm getting points here, fading the Giants in a scenario where the Giants may be looking to sort of fade their own life for their, down the stretch here. I mean, they got a big game they need to lose against Vegas in 3 weeks. That's going to be electric.
No, I got you there. And I'm with you. We will switch over to the Commanders at the plus 2.5 on that one. But you mentioned the Raiders. And as we move on to the Raiders game, they find themselves in Philadelphia taking on the Eagles. 11.5 point favorites here. And listen, Raiders plus 11.5. They had the craziest backdoor cover I've seen in a while. They lost to the Broncos, but they're a mess. Kenny Pickett's music was involved a bit last year. Who am I kidding though? This game is about talking about the Eagles. This game has the potential to be the bounce back because the Eagles definitely need a bounce back. Most notably, Jalen Hurts definitely needs a bounce back. But I'm also trying not to overreact too much to what happened last week. I don't know though. The whole fact of laying 11.5 points with that Eagles offense though is a tough one for me. And it's a tough one that, it's going to cause me to take a step back and have a nice conversation with you to calm the nerves about what we witnessed Jalen Hurts do on Monday Night Football. Because he was doing the most.
Yeah.
I'm on the Raiders here plus 11.5, and being on the Raiders plus whatever isn't a great place to be.
I don't know if I've systematically detested one single human being on the sporting field more than I did on Jalen Hurts in that one game on Monday.
Tough. It was a tough watch.
It was appalling. It was ridiculous. And it was frankly unbecoming of somebody who has Super Bowl MVP on their resume. Like it literally, I want to go back and re-give Super Bowl MVP to Cooper DeJean.
Yeah.
Because honestly, Cooper, they could have played Cooper DeJean at quarterback, I think, and won that game. I mean, I believe Cooper DeJean could do just about anything. I'm sure he was a high school quarterback.
Yeah.
Dude, it was so bad. But
it's the Raiders.
What are we gonna bet on the Raiders in Philadelphia? What is that gonna look like? Geno Smith's got a shoulder injury. I would make the case that I'd be more interested in Kenny Pickett if this were last week against the Broncos, maybe, or against, maybe against the Giants. Maybe the Giants' best hope for losing that game in 2 weeks is if Kenny Pickett plays, because I think Kenny Pickett is probably the better option than Geno Smith. I think Kenny Pickett's got kind of a bum rap because of what he was asked to do immediately in Pittsburgh. Yeah. And then he's good enough to sort of, listen, if I'll put it this way, if Howie Roseman's willing to pick you up, I'm kind of just automatically I think that player must be good. Or, you know what I mean? Sort of relatively. And he then, plays a little bit for the Eagles last year, plays actually pretty well, and then sort of kind of hops around a little bit. And that's, he finds his way to the Raiders, which by the way is a pretty good place to land if you're trying to get playing time, because again, the Geno Smith either being just terrible or getting injured was a high probability situation. So I think it's going to be Kenny Pickett that plays this week. And again, I think the market rating for the Raiders should go up, or my own personal power rating for the Raiders should go up if that's the case. Except the problem is for Pickett, and it's the same thing for next week, is he's got to deal with the Eagles' defensive line this week and the Texans' defensive line next week, both on the road.
Yeah.
And so, it's possible that the Philadelphia fans are so just openly done with this version of the Eagles. And so you're not going to get the crowd noise that's going to affect the Raiders' god-awful offensive line. You're saying can they score this many points to cover 11.5? They might score 12.
Yeah.
Because, you know what I mean? And they might cover, because I'm not super sure how the Raiders are going to score in this game, right? Because they don't have, as much as we think maybe Kenny Pickett's an upgrade on Geno Smith, they don't have Justin Herbert, who, I think I referenced very briefly last week, but the heroism, loosely used word, but the effort that Justin Herbert put in last week was unbelievable. To stay upright as best as he could, be screw it, I'm running here, with my mangled, oven mitt left hand, and so on and so. That's the only reason that the Chargers got and the Jalen Hurts interceptions that set up some short fields were the only reason that the Chargers were able to score. And so if you're going to tell me the Raiders are going to get a bunch of interceptions and stuff like that, I think I have to at least, and I hate to say it, it's why I led with the sort of visceral reaction to Jalen Hurts, I have to assume that Jalen Hurts isn't going to throw 4 interceptions because he had won the previous 12 games.
Yeah.
And so if you're not going to give the Raiders short field, then the Raiders just going to get sacked a billion times. And the Eagles are probably going to just systematically kind of grind them into submission here and win a game 17-3.
Sure.
20-6. Maybe there's a 24-pointer in here. So, imagine being so bummed out about the Eagles that you're not sure that they can get 24 points against the Raiders. The Raiders are so bad. And so, I realize it's as I'm talking this through, we're laying so many points in some of these games. Man, it's December. Kind of that time of year. Yeah, it's just kind of that time of year.
Yeah, and this one's a switch as well. Sometimes, as I mentioned earlier in the pod, sometimes it's just CP3 to Blake Griffin, need that extra push across the, over the basket, I guess, to keep the basketball reference going. Next game though, we got the Cardinals who are traveling to the Texans to take on that Texans defense. Texans defense laying 9.5 points at home. Another big spread here, but another instance where I'm going to be on the points with Arizona and Jacoby Brissett and that offense that, somehow moves the ball. They do stuff. They do stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the Texans offense, I mean, the defense might do the job here.
Yeah.
The Texans offense is just tough. And if I have to rely on the Texans offense to cover double digits, essentially, it's a tough ask. It's a tough ask. As mentioned, Jacoby Brissett is more than serviceable, I think. They might just be the most average team there is in the NFL. You could tell me that, and I'll take that. And with that said, if I'm getting almost 10 points here, I'm going to take the 9.5. Let's go.
Well, I think that's an important point, right? And it's how we talk about these games, and we assign numbers to them from a market perspective, right? But like the Cardinals would sign up for average from a market rating perspective.
Definitely.
They'd be like, "What? 50 out of 100? Like, yeah, man. Like, give me that. Like, I'm in." Because the market, again, because they keep getting, I shouldn't say keep getting blown out, because they were in a 3-point game on the road against Tampa Bay a couple of weeks ago. Again, that maybe doesn't necessarily look all that great because of where the market is, treating Tampa Bay. But yeah, like they're still 36 out of 100. They are rated below the Giants from a market perspective.
Yeah.
Drink that one in, Shell.
Yeah.
Put that one in your pipe. Put that one in your corncob pipe and smoke it. They're rated below the Falcons. They're rated below the Panthers. They're rated below the Dolphins. They're rated below the Giants. They are barely above the Commanders, which I think speaks more to how low the Commanders are currently rated based on the fact that they're underdogs to the Giants. So, all that is to say, tough spot for the Texans. Again, you can never, unfortunately, in the NFL, assume forward rational coaching, rational decision making. You can never assume that Jalen Hurts isn't going to throw 4 interceptions. You can never assume that the Chiefs aren't going to drop 7 passes. You can only look backwards and say something like, what if Andy Reid doesn't go for it on 4th and 1?
Yeah.
What if he just keeps punting the football back to the Texans and dares the Texans offense to go down the field? And maybe they go down the field, they get a big play, something like that, and they get a field goal.
Sure.
Right? That was the frustrating part. It was like, you're just going to give them field goal range right now? Like, it just doesn't make any sense. So when they score a touchdown, they sort of validate themselves, but it was also like a boon to them. And I'm not a big momentum guy, but in that instance, right? And Chris Collinsworth mentioned it. He's like, yeah, the Chiefs defense are probably pretty bummed out about, being dominant for the last 5 drives. And now they're sort of backs against the wall on the 30, 25-yard line, whatever it was. So all of that to say, assumption of rational coaching working backwards. What if Andy Reid doesn't go for it? Where do we sort of think the Texans are if they lose that game, 13-10, 17-10, 17-13? Well, they didn't. And so they win that game, and now they are rated right alongside the Chiefs at 65 out of 100. This is a team that was 6-point underdogs at home to the Bills 3 weeks ago. Again, quarterback was different. Davis Mills to CJ Stroud. I'll ask you this. Another week of CJ Stroud. How much difference do you think CJ Stroud makes to Davis Mills? And if your answer is from a 43, taking his team from a 43 rating to a 65 rating, I don't believe you. Let's go to that meme. I don't believe you.
Yeah,
and I know you're not going to say that. Yeah, because that's too much of an upgrade, right? And so part of that upgrade I get is that the betting market is now sort of finally in the last 3 weeks catching on to the Texans defense and the ability of the Texans defense to make these sorts of plays to sort of keep them in the game or get them a 10-0 lead and allow them to sort of hang on. But again, did the Texans defense drop the passes and again, you made the good point, right? Maybe that hit earlier on in the game sort of retroactively did sort of cause that drop from Rashee Rice. So, again, who knows? Point is like, if I'm telling you something, what I'm telling you here is that the rating for the Texans is not just through their previous range, the ceiling of their range, but through the level after that.
Yeah.
Right? Like, we were at 45 to 60 for the Texans for a very long time. We are now at 65. And meanwhile, I just told you, if you're sort of thinking maybe the Cardinals are around an average team, well, the betting market has them at 36, which is not just below their average, below through or their range, through the bottom side of their range. So it's team way sort of underrated against team, I'm gonna say it, a little bit overrated. And that's how we've got ourselves to like 9.5 here. I think you can grab a 10 out there for maybe a little bit more than -110. That would be my sort of advice with regards to the Cardinals. Little Cardinals plus 10, like -115 is kind of the target price there, or better, of course.
Yeah, let's go Cards indeed. We got the San Francisco 49ers fresh off a bye and at home, laying 12.5 points to the Tennessee Titans. Titans, mentioned it earlier, ran the ball against Cleveland. Cam Ward had 2 TDs, but I don't like their offense against this Niners team. Do I like the Niners laying 12.5 points? Not really, but this is kind of a weight class, even though I don't think the Niners are of the weight class that normally demands these like double-digit spreads against bad teams. But the institution of the Niners coming off a bye, they'll just take care of business in this game, and I think they can win it by 2 touchdowns against a pretty bad Titans team. And, you know, we need Brock Purdy. You know, he was looking kind of had some shaky moments since coming off the injuries. Maybe the bye week gets him a little more buttoned up. So I'm laying a 12.5 points here with the Niners.
Yeah, I would like to think that there's an element of like, you know, Ricky Pearsall getting the bye week, right? And being able to be like, all right, like how do we get these two sort of like, you know, on point? And how do we, you know, obviously Christian McCaffrey, like my guy could use a week in Cancun.
Definitely.
Right? So yeah, and so the 49ers, like their market rating, like obviously went up from winning that game. The last game that they won, which was, what was their last game?
Browns?
Browns game. Yes.
Am I
I was
making
like,
that up?
I forgot about that. No, you're right.
Browns.
So the market rating goes up because they handled the Browns nicely there. And then, of course, it's augmented by the fact that they have this bye week that, again, should be sort of well timed. I'm not going to tell you that, like, oh, we need to be grabbing the Titans here. I don't think that's, like, again, they win that game and, like, the market sort of shrugged its shoulders because this look ahead line is 12.5. So it's a bit of it's like the number to me is kind of right about fair. I don't think you're getting a deal with the 49ers either. And so I think it's just kind of like the correct number. And so we kind of promised everybody that maybe there was going to be sort of a short depiction of a game. This would be that. Although I do have to ask you, what's your confidence level right now, or your hope level with regards to the 49ers potentially winning the division, knowing full well that they have the tiebreaker from a record perspective. And when it comes down to the rest of the season, put it to you this way. Seattle hosts the Rams a week from now.
Yep.
If Seattle wins that game at home, currently a pick'em in the look-ahead line.
Yep.
And San Francisco has, I guess, as they've had all season, pretty soft schedule. They got easier with the Daniel Jones injury, right? Where it's Colts next week, and then it's Bears at home. And then they finish the season home to Seattle. Right? Very sort of reasonable that they win the next 3 games and that they have that game with Seattle. So really all this division comes down to is San Francisco winning that last week and Seattle having already beaten the Rams. And all these teams would be 13-4. And the 49ers would have the tiebreak given that they would be 5-1 in the division.
Okay.
How do you feel now about the confidence of that?
I'm not confident in that. I just think it's too good to be true. I'd put that at odds makers. I give that a 25%.
25%. So 25% is 3-1 odds, right? 75 to 25 down to 3-1. 49ers are available right now, plus 700 to win the division. Well, 7-1 shot with that path that they have sort of created for themselves, which if you're looking at those sort of futures markets, right? Like they are a thing that exists throughout the season. And so a week ago, there's a game against the Colts that is sort of creating the market, you know, as it was. And so when you see Daniel Jones, I'm sure when you saw Daniel Jones go down, the first thing you didn't think was 49ers game 2 weeks from now. Maybe you did. Maybe there's a couple of 49ers fans that immediately thought that. But it's a thing that, as we've just seen for the Seahawks, that if the line changes 8 to 10 points, right, it's going to change the probability of the 49ers winning that game 2 weeks from now. 40, 50, 60%. And yet the market just still sits there going, well, we had it at 7-1 last week and the Rams won and the Seahawks won. So why would we change it from 7-1? And the answer is the Niners' path got a lot easier. The Rams haven't played in Seattle yet. And you haven't gotten a chance to play Seattle, a team that you've already beat, at home in the potential finale. So just to put that out there to everybody, 7-1 available. I believe it's DraftKings that has the 7-1 available for the 49ers. If you're looking, you haven't made a bet on the NFC West, you know it's going to be crazy coming down the stretch here. You think the Seahawks are maybe going to win at home in the rematch against the Rams. Maybe you're sitting there, week 18, 49ers just need to beat the Seahawks at home, and you have a 7-1 ticket. You can do stuff with that ticket. You can make moves with that ticket. You don't even need the 49ers to win that game. You can be profitable before that even happens.
Interesting stuff there for sure. And that's why the people love and enjoy and come to this podcast each and every week. We move on to the Jags, 12.5-point favorites at home to the Jets. Are the Jags good? I feel like I'm always asking this question. Trevor Lawrence has been great since the bye week, but laying 12.5 points is a big ask. But then I'm remembering it's the Jets, who were blown out by Miami. We all know Miami runs the ball well. We know the Jags can run the ball well. And I do think the Jags are really that bad. So I'm laying the 12.5 points with the Jags.
Yeah. When do we have to start having conversations about Trevor Lawrence comeback player of the year, by the way?
Never.
Okay. There you go. Asked and answered, everyone. Yeah. Well, okay. Look ahead line 9.5.
Yep.
So let's start there. The 3-point adjustment. What does that 3-point adjustment entail? Well, obviously we start at the quarterback position. And if Brady Cook is involved again, I'm probably out.
That sounds like a create a player in Madden.
Yeah. And he would be from Missouri because that's a sort of a nondescript quality school, right? Where it's like,
Or Iowa.
SEC team. Yeah, right. It's like Big Ten team, like everybody, black and yellow colors. Like that all sounds right. And he is, in fact, from Missouri. Tyrod Taylor's questionable. Justin Fields is questionable. Again, this is like the poor man's version of the Colts thing, right? Where it's like we gotta know who the quarterback is. What do we think about Brady Cook relative to Justin Fields? If Justin Fields is all of a sudden back in our lives, right? Is this gonna be Justin Fields against the Bengals? Well, no, probably not. But are we also going to be getting 12.5 points if it's Justin Fields? We talked about these backup quarterbacks that the Seahawks keep playing. I don't even know who the backup quarterback is amongst this group. Who is the retroactive or proactive? Who is the number one, the number two, and number three? Is Tyrod Taylor I think he is the best option, which again, there's some confusion in and around that as well. So yeah, I think 12.5 is too high, but again, if the looming prospect or specter of Brady Cook being in the mix here, I'm not digging that, right? I believe undrafted rookie out of Missouri, 14 of 30. Listen, he was in a tough spot last week. I'm not going to beat him up about being in a trailing game state.
Not fair
this way, right? Yeah, Brady Cook throwing the ball 30 times in a trailing game state. Jackson Dart could have been doing that in a trailing game state against the Patriots a couple of weeks ago, showing us at least some effort to try to win the game. But yeah, so what do you want to say, right? We need to know who's going to start. I don't want anything to do with really a Brady Cook situation.
Yeah.
Liam Cohen just seems like a dude who's in to running up the score if given an opportunity. He's looking to send some messages if given the opportunity. Yeah, so I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what happens with this one.
Totally got you there with the Jags, and that'll be an interesting one as they continue to stay hot post bye week for sure. Sunday Night Football, interesting matchup. Dallas Cowboys, 5.5-point favorites, hosting the Vikings. Vikings is mentioned last week. First off, we go back 2 weeks from getting shut out to then doing the shutting out. Interesting stuff there as we went through when we were talking about the Commanders game. Meanwhile, they stay in the NFC East to face the Cowboys, and Cowboys, they came back down to earth last week a little bit against the Lions there, but I think it was more so a bad spot for them. A bunch of tough games in a row in a short amount of time as well. And now we got the Cowboys, back to business. I feel like 5.5 points. I like that. Less than a touchdown with that offense. Maybe Pickens sorts out a little bit of his professionalism, if I'm being polite. But yeah, give me the Cowboys. I'll lay the 5.5 points with Dallas against Mr. McCarthy.
Yeah, look headline was 7. It opened 6, and honestly, I agree with the move down to 5.5.
Okay.
I got +6 with the Vikings. Again, right, the stench. Maybe it's still lingering. Maybe there's still JJ McCarthy related lingering stench.
Oh, it is.
Again, we've talked about this a couple of times, right? Just the lack of Justin Jefferson in this offense has been the most vexing part about the entire operation. But McCarthy does pretty well with the other guys. It's the fact that he is, and again, they're not asking him to do a ton, right? 16 to 23 last week for 163, throws 3 touchdowns, 2 of which to Josh Oliver, right? And it's that is the Kevin O'Connell offense going we're going to cook up a bunch of stuff, and then Josh Oliver is going to score right in your face. And you're like, what? Josh Oliver? It's he can't get Justin Jefferson open because everybody's paying attention to him. And he's just you know what? That's fine. We're going to be able to open up things for JJ by getting, all the attention sort of headed towards Justin Jefferson. And if you dare not give Justin Jefferson the attention, that would be the time when I think that you're going to actually kind of be able to sort of explode here. And so, listen, we all got really excited with the Cowboys defense, right? They're doing it. They got new guys. They're playing well now. And then you watch it last week and you're like, oh no. There's still a pretty significant disorganization there. Your boy the Flus didn't have the answer all of a sudden. So yeah, man, I'm gonna take the points here again against a bad Cowboys defense. And maybe the run D sort of bucks its head again, where Quinn Williams is back to playing really well. Maybe because there's a couple extra days of rest, you start talking yourself into that. I just want to be laying points here with the Cowboys team that again, if you can't figure out that the last week's game was super important and that, the George Pickenses of the world need to be laying out there to do everything they can to catch the ball, where there was people showed some clips. They didn't even show half of the clips.
Oh yeah.
Where George Pickens was I'm not fighting for that ball.
Yeah.
I'm he's even vaguely surprised the ball was even being thrown to him. Yeah. And so it's okay. Maybe
there's the guy we were talking about.
Maybe there's an expectation that that's going to happen, and more power to you for having that expectation. I cannot be living that life. I can't have that expectation with the Cowboys, and so I expect a close game. Again, I think the Vikings are, as much as I've had issues at different points with Kevin O'Connell, some of the decision making. It's one thing when you're a favorite; it's another thing when you're an underdog here in Dallas, a team that when they have been favored, hasn't really gone all that well this season, even though it has been very rare this season, which, by the way, I think is also kind of telling that the Cowboys are favorites so rarely this season. I believe it was the Cardinals on Monday night last time they were a favorite there, and the Cardinals of all teams walked in and won that game pretty convincingly. I think the Vikings could do the same thing.
You're not wrong. You almost had me there.
Okay.
We go on to Monday Night Football here. One more game, and it's the Dolphins traveling to Pittsburgh, where the Steelers are 3-point home favorites. Aaron Rodgers, probably his best game of the season. We talked about it earlier, throwing deep balls downfield, scrambling for touchdowns. Tomlin doing Aaron Rodgers' celebration on the sideline. The vibes are high. But they played the Ravens, and I think the Ravens played a huge part in this. So this comes down to the Dolphins. I don't think they're good. They've won 4 in a row. They're playing all right. Tua looked okay in the cold, all that fun stuff. But he was also trying to throw a bunch of picks. The 3 points was there for me. The 3 points was staring at me to be yeah, take the Dolphins in the points. But I'm not trusting Tua in the cold of Pittsburgh again. Tua in the cold is something that I'm just not going to ever buy into. So give me the Steelers. I'll lay the 3 points. And I'll be fooled by Tomlin and Aaron Rodgers for 1 week. I'm okay with that.
Yeah, because it's funny, right? The Steelers, largely uncharacteristically, I think we could say, completed those long passes.
Yeah.
They were also given a long pass to the Jalen Warren one that I mentioned before.
Yep.
And so if you're winning in an uncharacteristic way and you're still they're leading that game throughout, and
Yeah.
they're not able to run the football against the Ravens. Why am I supposed to assume that they're going to be able to win uncharacteristically or score uncharacteristically again? And by the way, it's a longer conversation. Pretty sure Isaiah likely scored a touchdown there. Also pretty sure that Aaron Rodgers threw an interception there instead of somehow having a reception that, if it were in any other field of play scenario,
It made no sense.
he would have not survived the ground or maintained control or all of the things that we're told about catches everywhere else. But if it's Aaron Rodgers, you can have the ball, have your knee on the ground, and everything's fine. I would cite, if we need to sort of go with precedent, I don't know if you remember this, the Cade Otton Sunday Night Football against the Rams. Remember, he's like juggling the ball, and then he has it, and his knee is on the ground, and then the Rams just grab the ball from him and run down and score a touchdown. And everybody seemed to be okay with it. Everybody's just like, yep, he didn't have control long enough. And it's like, well, he had two hands on the ball, and his knee was on the ground. They're like, sorry, that's not enough. And then all of a sudden, when Aaron Rodgers does it, when another guy's hands are on the ball the entire time, all of a sudden it's totally fine. And so, listen, I'm not advocating for the fact that like the Ravens should have won or should have covered. I'm just saying like things went about as good as it can go for the Steelers and their offense with regards to Rodgers in honestly pretty nice weather in Baltimore, being able to hit DK Metcalf, being able to find some deep shots, and getting a super easy touchdown when it came to Jaylen Warren. And they still almost sort of could have, probably should have lost that game.
Yeah.
And now people are going to tell me, oh, Miami in the cold. And all of that's sort of theoretically fair, right? And like I am the first to sort of go, I don't really want anything to do with that either. Miami's running the ball really, really good with Devon Achane.
Definitely are.
Why is that not the same thing as the Bills 2 weeks ago, where they're able to run on the Steelers defense at home? Everybody's surprised. Oh, it's the most ever given up at Acrisure Stadium, and like da, right? And again, like they can do that, and they can do it maybe not as well, but they also don't need to win this game. They can just lose this game by 3 because the line is 3.5. And you mentioned Tua, like he's played 4 straight games. They have 4 straight wins, right? Yep. He has not cracked 100 pass attempts cumulatively in those 4 games. 21, 20, 23, and 21. By my quick math, that's 85 pass attempts in 4 games. Like, Mike McDaniel is like, dog, you are not throwing the football. And if you are, by the way, a lot of those are checked down to
screen.
Yeah. So it's like, it isn't Miami in the way of like earlier in the season where it's like 32 pass attempts, 34 pass attempts, 36, 32, 40 pass attempts against Baltimore in that Thursday night game.
Yeah.
It's just like, no, man, we are not letting you through. I mean, now, listen, he still somehow has 3 interceptions in all of that because he's 2 against the Bills and then 1 against the Saints. But again, fundamentally, right? And so the point here is like, I think that Dolphins can run the football. We have a questionable Devon Achane, but I think what we saw last week is Jalen Wright comes in there.
Yeah.
And it kind of like, it's not that it's not a Devon Achane thing, because I think he's the more explosive guy, because I think like Wright's like longest rush was like 12 yards. But like he comes in 24 for 107. Like he's churning it out.
Yeah.
You also have Ollie Gordon in there, right? Like one of the better running backs in college football the last couple of years, right? Does a little bit of a different thing. So, listen, by the time Monday rolls around, I expect Devon Achane to play. I think that if anything, the fact that the Dolphins are 6-7, who are tied with the Ravens and tied with the Chiefs in the standings, are at least like, like we're trying. Like, and again, part of that is, okay, the general manager's gone, but guess what? McDaniel's back next year. We've talked about this, I think, last week. Tua is back next year, kind of no matter what. And it's just now like, all right, we're essentially practicing for next year with the combination of Tua and Mike McDaniel to take pressure off of Tua to not have to throw the ball 30 whatever times. Now, if you get into a game script where the other team's blowing you out, you're going to probably have to throw the ball a bunch of times. Yeah. But that brings us back to the Steelers and their general capability of taking that lead and having you worried to the point where you then completely avoid and forget about your game plan and start throwing the ball around. And I just don't think that the Dolphins are going to do that, almost in like a stubborn type of a way where Mike McDaniel's like, no, I'm not doing the thing where like Tua is going to throw a bunch of interceptions. We're just going to run the football. Achane, Wright, Gordon. I think they're going to be able to do that against the Steelers because, again, nothing from last week necessarily told me, yep, Steelers are back. Look out. Like, they're going to be a problem in the playoffs. I'm still not totally positive they're going to win the division. I'm still hoping the Bengals, who, if they beat the Ravens this week, can sort of sneak back into the mix. That's how garbage the AFC North is, by the way, which again just leads us back to why should any of these AFC North teams be favored by more than a field goal against anybody, especially when that anybody seems to have a little bit of sort of a mojo going here with some better play of late. So that's where I'm at there.
Two super interesting games and two interesting ways to end the pod, where I'm laying points with the Steelers and Cowboys. Oof.
Oh,
we'll be back to discuss how that goes next week. But in the meantime, where can the people find you for more of the information they so crave, my dude?
Yeah, buddy, bowl season is upon us. Go to substack.com or download the Substack app. Type in The Window Sports, Matt Russell, sports betting, The Window, any sort of combination of those words should be able to get you where you need to go there. You can be a free subscriber. You can be a paid subscriber. We also do a bunch of free stuff over at Yahoo Sports. Maybe you've heard of it. And then, of course, at MRussAuthentic on Twitter. If you want to make the bets along with us and then you want to complain about those bets when they're not going your way, that's what we do over there, where we get a little loose, we get a little unhinged just to kind of cope with all of the nonsense that happens. But yeah, college football season, bowl season, the college football playoff, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, obviously, NFL playoffs, all of that good stuff coming in the very near future.
Yes, so much going on right now. It's a great time on the sports calendar. So stay tuned for, more episodes of the pod coming to you in different weeks to come. You can find me, Sheldon Alexander, online on Twitter at Shell Alexander, on Instagram at Sheldon Alexander. Of course, this podcast, Apple, Spotify, and as mentioned, YouTube. Make sure you like, follow, and subscribe. Rate us, review us, share with your friends who are interested. It's Christmas time, Spend some lunch money, could come up with some more money for Christmas time. Sounds like a fun time, doesn't it? Bet responsibly, kids. As I always say, I used to pray for times like this to rhyme like this. This is the Clutch Picks Betting Podcast, as always, unpolished and unapologetic. Until next time, see ya.